Who changed my class to become a female heavy gunner? Am I surnamed Stark? Welcome back, brave explorers of impossible worlds. We are excited to have you here to continue this odyssey together. Before we continue, everything you'll hear is pure fiction. So please don't try to replicate combat techniques at home. This wonderful story in all its rights belong to its brilliant original author. We are only the messengers of entertainment. Want another dose of adventure? Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single chapter. And if you can't wait, our Patreon has exclusive surprises you'll love. Chapter 126. You don't mean to let her join S.H.I.E.L.D, do you? Don't be impulsive, officer. What did I do wrong? Although Skye was still trying her best to pretend, Leni had already seen through her. She glanced at the other woman's ID with feigned interest, then pronounced her name strangely. Skye, is that right? Why did you cross out your last name? Skye had clearly answered this question many times before, showing little emotion, and casually replied, I'm an orphan, officer. I don't know my last name, that's just the last name of my previous host family. Leni knew the other woman's background, so she nodded without saying anything more and returned the ID. Then, her eyes narrowed, and she looked at Skye with a serious expression. You've been following us, Skye dared not admit it and quickly tried to explain. I didn't, officer, I was actually going to. That's not a question. Leni interrupted Skye's excuses in a deep voice, gesturing for her to get out of the car, and simultaneously took out her communicator and called Kelson. Kelson, get someone to take this woman and her car back to the station. I'm going to interrogate her myself when we get back. Hearing this, Skye was no longer willing to cooperate. She pulled back her hand from the car door, shouting, Hey! You can't do that. I didn't do anything. What right do you have to arrest me? Skye didn't dare let them take her back, otherwise, all her efforts would be wasted. Leni paused, her hand on the phone a little impatient with the woman yelling in her ear. She put the phone back in her pocket, then reached down and pulled her sunglasses down so the other person could see her eyes. You have no right to refuse. Her golden pupils flickered like flames, both magnificent and terrifying. You? Skye was terrified, her mouth agape in disbelief, unable to utter a complete sentence. HMPH with a soft snort, seeing that the woman was intimidated, Leni pushed her glasses back up. Seeing Kelson reverse his car and park it in front of the van, Leni walked around to the other side, opened the door, and looked inside. A makeshift bed, a computer, a camera, and a whole host of other electronic devices suggested Skye lived in the van. You live here? Kelson stared at her as he got out of the car. Skye replied irritably, What else? I don't have a home. Leni didn't ask why she didn't go back to her host family. Instead, she nodded and closed the door again. Leni's only memories of Skye were that she was an Inhuman, her mother a Chinese-American Inhuman leader, and her father a villain. After coming into contact with a 084 artifact, the Obelisk, Skye gained superpowers, codenamed Quake. Besides that, Skye's real name was Daisy Johnson, and she herself was 084. Because her father was constantly wanted by S.H.I.E.L.D, Skye was monitored by S.H.I.E.L.D from a young age. And to ensure her safety, they arranged for Skye to move every so often until she grew up. This is why Skye always felt that a mysterious force was controlling her life. She vowed to find them and find out about her origins. During this time, she taught herself hacking skills, repeatedly infiltrating the CIA, FBI, and Pentagon, successfully entering the ranks of the world's top hackers. Thanks to the help of S.H.I.E.L.D, Skye was not captured by these forces, thus gaining considerable fame within the industry. After the Battle of New York, the Rising Tide organization rose to prominence, and Skye joined them, helping them investigate the Tahiti project. Leni's knowledge of the American TV series Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D was limited. This was all she remembered about Skye. Seeing that the other had given up resisting, Leni didn't continue to intimidate her, put away her pistol, and handcuffed her. Skye initially tried to struggle, but after Leni applied a little force, she became docile in pain. Ignoring the way Skye was scrutinizing her, Leni gestured for Kelson to come closer. She's Skye. Kelson frowned upon hearing this, carefully recalling the secrets surrounding the name Skye. Then she remembered that S.H.I.E.L.D had a girl listed as 084 who had named herself Skye. How did she get here? Leni shrugged, implying she didn't know. Have someone take her back later. I'm quite interested in her. Callison looked Leni up and down suspiciously, wondering why she wanted Sky. What kind of look is that? Can't you see she's all alone? I just feel sorry for her. Leni felt a little guilty under his gaze, but thankfully, her large sunglasses blocked Callison's view, preventing him from seeing her shifty eyes. After a moment of silence, Callison thought it might be a good idea and nodded in agreement. Good. With you, at least we won't have to worry about her safety, and you can provide her with a better environment and education. Seeing that Callison understood her good intentions, Leni breathed a sigh of relief. Right? Being with me is better than being watched by all your secretive agents. Stark Industries can also provide her with enough learning space. Callison nodded, agreeing. But then something occurred to him, and he looked at Leni suspiciously again. You don't mean to get her to join S.H.I.E.L.D, do you? Leni didn't answer Callison immediately, but instead gave him a meaningful smile. Before Sky went astray, Leni really wanted to bring her into S.H.I.E.L.D, or even the Avengers. After all, Leni happened to possess a 084 item, the obelisk. When S.H.I.E.L.D arrived with his men to take Sky away, Leni's eyes darted around. S.H.I.E.L.D, we're going to eat, do you want to come? Upon hearing this, not only the three members of the science team who had been watching the whole thing, but even Callison frowned inwardly. While they wouldn't make the basic mistake of discussing mission details outside S.H.I.E.L.D, wasn't it inappropriate to invite S.H.I.E.L.D to such a clearly private gathering? Clearly, S.H.I.E.L.D also sensed that the others weren't very welcoming of him, even though none of them showed it. I'll pass, it's not appropriate for me to come to your dinner. Hey, what's inappropriate about it? I haven't properly thanked you for what happened last time. It's on me. Let's go. Leni pulled S.H.I.E.L.D along, giving Callison a wink at the same time. Although he didn't understand why Leni was doing this, Callison, who knew her personality, knew she wouldn't do it without a reason. So he also stepped forward to gather his old buddies, planning to ask Leni what was going on later. S.H.I.E.L.D, who had come with 2 cars and a group of men, couldn't refuse the hospitality. He simply had his men take Sky back in the other car, and let the rest of them take the van. He himself drove behind Callison's SUV, and the 2 cars went together to the Chinese restaurant that Leni had booked in advance. Chapter 127. You'd better let me go. Otherwise. You brought Hildwell along for a reason, right? Sitting in the pilot's seat, Callison voiced the question on behalf of the 3 science team members in the back seats. Leni smiled slyly, her eyes gleaming with cunning. This mission requires a pilot. I don't know your skill level, but they certainly can't do it, let alone me. However, before Leni could finish, Callison interrupted her. Then you've probably miscalculated. The department needs Hildwell to carry the load right now. Shaking his head, he thought to himself that Leni was likely wasting her money. Due to the current turbulent global situation, the few level 8 agents at headquarters have been sent out on missions, and less than half of the level 7 agents remain. Seeing Leni's face darken, Callison continued with amusement. In short, Hildwell is no longer available for long-term missions. You should forget about expecting him to fly with us for 2 or 3 months. Leni's face turned grim. She now deeply regretted not discussing it with Callison earlier. Does that mean I'll be wasting my money on him later? Seeing their idolized S.H.I.E.L.D star like this, the 3 people in the back row couldn't help but exchange amused glances. I think so. Callison's smile was almost impossible to hide. Then we're still short a pilot, aren't we? Fitz didn't dare join Callison in mocking Leni, and quickly tried to smooth things over and change the subject. Don't worry, I've already made arrangements. Callison gave the people behind him a reassuring look, looking very confident. I contacted a highly skilled pilot through personal connections, but she won't be able to join until tomorrow. I'll remember this restaurant. I'll be a regular customer. I didn't expect you to find such a delicious Chinese restaurant in Washington, Leni. S.H.I.E.L.D smacked his lips, clearly very satisfied with this free dinner. Although the Chinese food he ate this time was noticeably different from the Chinese food he had tasted before, it didn't stop him from praising it highly. As long as you like it. Leni forced a smile, her face showing no sign of displeasure. Callison, who was gloating nearby, suppressed a laugh and patted his friend on the shoulder. Let's go back together. S.H.I.E.L.D, oblivious to anything amiss, didn't think much of it and sat up, burping contentedly. Leni also got up to pay the bill, and while doing so, she muttered menacingly to the proprietress, "Hey, see that bald guy with glasses? If he comes to eat here again, give him a good thrashing." The proprietress glanced at her, not understanding why Leni was targeting the bald man. But judging from his appearance, he wasn't a good person. He was probably trying to make things difficult for this blonde girl who spoke fluent Chinese. She secretly gave Leni an okay sign, her face clearly saying, "Leave it to me." Leni immediately returned a grateful emoji, and the proprietress gave her a 20% discount. After paying the bill, Leni couldn't help but sigh. There are still so many good people in this world. At this time, S.H.I.E.L.D was unaware that the restaurant owner had remembered him. So much so that the second time he came, when he invited someone to eat there, he ordered the same dishes and paid double the price. The owner's reason was, last time, that girl specifically requested the best ingredients. You said you wanted the same thing this time, so I made it to the same standard. How was it? Did you like it? Afterwards, S.H.I.E.L.D felt something was amiss and went to Leni to ask if it was as the owner had said. Leni, forcing a smile, gave S.H.I.E.L.D a serious affirmative answer. She then proceeded to give him a long, elaborate theory about Chinese ingredients, almost bringing out the anime cooking master boy to prove it. Meanwhile, everyone returned to the station satisfied, and Leni and Callison went to the interrogation room where S.H.I.E.L.D was being held. They greeted the agent guarding the door, indicating that they could rest. Carrying a paper bag, Leni followed Callison inside. Hearing someone enter, S.H.I.E.L.D, who had been dozing on the table, sat bolt upright. "Who are you people? This isn't a police station. I'm going to charge you with unlawful detention." When S.H.I.E.L.D was taken back to S.H.I.E.L.D, she sensed something was wrong halfway there. These people weren't the FBI. At first, S.H.I.E.L.D felt the logo on the vehicle driven by the people who had abducted her looked familiar. But she was too afraid of the woman with the golden eyes to remember immediately. It wasn't until she was brought here that she remembered what organization these people were. S.H.I.E.L.D. That mysterious organization she had been investigating for so long without any leads. However, realizing this now was obviously too late, S.H.I.E.L.D knew she had walked right into the lion's den. But what she didn't expect was that those who had abducted her simply locked her in the room and left her there. Not only was there no water, but for hours no one had come in to interrogate her. S.H.I.E.L.D yelled at the monitor on the wall for a while, but the group didn't even utter a sound. Finally, exhausted from yelling, S.H.I.E.L.D slumped onto the table, listening to her stomach rumble. Who are these people? And what's with that woman? Half asleep, S.H.I.E.L.D drifted off to sleep until she was startled awake by Callison opening the door. "I'm telling you, you'd better let me go. Otherwise," seeing that someone had finally arrived, S.H.I.E.L.D immediately regained her fighting spirit and was about to unleash a torrent of abuse on Callison. But when she saw Leni behind him, S.H.I.E.L.D immediately fell silent, forcibly swallowing the curse words that were about to escape her lips. There was no way around it. The always smiling Callison did indeed seem like an easy target. But that woman with the golden eyes was different. She wasn't a normal human being. "Finished?" Leni, still wearing sunglasses, spoke in a flat, emotionless tone. "Now that you've finished, I'll speak." Leni tossed the paper bag containing the cheeseburger aside and sat down opposite S.H.I.E.L.D. "We found several large, unexplained transfers to your account, totaling several million. Don't tell me you made that from stocks." "Yes, I did. Honestly, I don't want to waste time." The thought of being stared at by those golden eyes made S.H.I.E.L.D feel incredibly uneasy. Although she couldn't see the other person's eyes, S.H.I.E.L.D still felt as if she had been seen through. It's a long story. The choice in chapter 128 is up to you. S.H.I.E.L.D herself found the whole story strange. Last month, S.H.I.E.L.D wasn't living in Washington, D.C., but in Flushing, New York. She had taken a job on the dark web. Her employer asked her to investigate Hammer Industries. S.H.I.E.L.D easily hacked into Hammer Industries' corporate network and collected crucial information about Iron Soldiers from their database. However, to S.H.I.E.L.D's surprise, Hammer Industries had a highly skilled individual within their ranks. After a massive online manhunt, S.H.I.E.L.D, sacrificing almost all of her compromised computers, successfully evaded their pursuit. Although the other party reacted quickly, S.H.I.E.L.D still managed to preserve some information about Iron Soldiers. But just as she was about to contact her former employer, he seemed to have vanished into thin air, disappearing from the internet. S.H.I.E.L.D could no longer contact him, nor find any information about him. It was as if he had never existed. Nobody knew him, nobody had ever heard of him. This is extremely rare on the dark web. No one can disappear without a trace on the dark web, no one. Fortunately, The employer had transferred the payment to her account in advance, otherwise S.H.I.E.L.D would have had nowhere to turn. S.H.I.E.L.D then sold the information to a buyer on the dark web for a high price. The buyer was shrewd. He also couldn't find any useful information and transferred the money immediately after receiving the data. But before S.H.I.E.L.D could even happily count the zeros in her account balance after making 2 fortunes, explosions rang out in the nearby Hammer Industries, one after another, violent explosions. Confused and disoriented, she had no choice but to flee in her car like everyone else. Later, when I was driving past the Stark Expo, I heard something had happened inside, so I stopped to see what was going on, S.H.I.E.L.D described vividly, while secretly glancing at Leni. She was afraid she hadn't described something well enough to displease Leni. Then I saw that guy named Justin Hammer being kidnapped. They got into your car. Hearing this, Carlson slightly turned his head to look at Leni. Leni remained silent, her face cold as she continued, so what happened today? S.H.I.E.L.D didn't hide anything, she'd already said what she shouldn't, so what difference did it make? This afternoon, I was planning to contact someone to launder the money, but they stood me up. I was feeling annoyed when I saw your SUV. The rest was clear. Curious, S.H.I.E.L.D wanted to see what kind of department dared to arrest the owner of Hammer Industries. So she'd been following Leni and her group's SUV. Unfortunately, S.H.I.E.L.D's tracking skills were terrible. She'd only gone 2 kilometers before Leni and Carlson spotted her. That's how it is. I honestly don't even know what you guys do. I'm telling the truth. Carlson and Leni exchanged a glance, indicating to Leni, you decide for yourself. Anyway, you specifically asked for this person, so you handle it. Leni, through her sunglasses, fixed her gaze on S.H.I.E.L.D's face. We checked your computer and phone and found you've been searching for information about S.H.I.E.L.D. What are you looking for? Damn it. I should have set up more encryption on my computer. S.H.I.E.L.D secretly regretted not checking the almanac before leaving home today. What bad luck. Don't want to answer? Leni's lips curled into a smile. You guessed right, this is the S.H.I.E.L.D. you've been looking for. Pointing to Carlson beside her, Leni introduced, since things have come to this. Let me introduce you. This is Carlson, a level 8 agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. My name is Leni Stark, the number 3 at Stark Industries, Tony Stark's assistant, and the richest woman in America. S.H.I.E.L.D recited the names with ease. Actually, she hadn't recognized Leni during the day. The fear in sunglasses only made her feel that the person looked somewhat familiar. It wasn't until the Stark Expo was mentioned that Carlson turned and glanced at Leni. That's when she remembered who the woman in front of her was. Not bad, saves me the trouble of introducing myself. With a flourish, Leni pulled a document from under the table and tossed it in front of S.H.I.E.L.D. You've always wanted to know about your origins, but no one has ever told you the answer. S.H.I.E.L.D turned incredulously to look under the table. She clearly remembered that the other person had only brought a paper bag before coming in. Where did that document come from? You want to use S.H.I.E.L.D to investigate your origins, who gave birth to you, and who abandoned you at the orphanage. Leni took a ballpoint pen from her pocket and pushed it in front of S.H.I.E.L.D. Sign that agreement, join S.H.I.E.L.D, in a proper way, with your own eyes, ears, and hands. Taking off her glasses, Leni stared intently into S.H.I.E.L.D's eyes. Go see, go hear, go find everything you want to know. S.H.I.E.L.D looked down at the classified document on the table bearing the S.H.I.E.L.D logo. Then she looked at Leni sitting opposite her, her voice trembling slightly. So you really know about my past? Before Leni could answer, Carlson, sitting beside her, spoke first. No, your past is top secret at S.H.I.E.L.D, and we have no right to know everything. If you want to know the truth, you'll have to find out for yourself. Carlson gestured for S.H.I.E.L.D to look at the document on the table before discussing anything further. S.H.I.E.L.D was a little confused, but after opening the document, she understood Carlson's meaning. 084, S.H.I.E.L.D gender, female except for the first 2 lines, all the remaining content was covered by black boxes. What does this mean? Clearly, this wasn't the original document, and they didn't currently have the authority to give S.H.I.E.L.D the original. It means exactly what it says. S.H.I.E.L.D knows you and is protecting you without your knowledge. Leni knew the truth, but she couldn't explain it to S.H.I.E.L.D yet. S.H.I.E.L.D being designated 084 was obviously not without reason. There were too many things involved: S.H.I.E.L.D, Hydra, the Inhumans, a complex web of various forces. Leni wasn't planning to involve her too early. She'd have to wait until she was fully prepared. Sign it, Find the answers yourself, but that also means you'll bear all the responsibilities and consequences. S.H.I.E.L.D isn't a place just anyone can stay. Sky's hand gripped the pen tightly. Or don't sign, go back to your van, and we'll use some methods to make you forget everything that happened today. No one will bother you anymore, you can live a carefree life with that money, and you'll still be Sky. Leni crossed her legs, shifting to a more comfortable position. The choice is yours. Grandma Orange's health has been problematic. Her father said it might be a brain hemorrhage, and she was taken to the hospital in their hometown last night. Orange doesn't know the specifics yet. Updates will be limited to 2 chapters for the next 2 days. Sorry everyone. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 129. What kind of person do you want to become? Due to your special circumstances, you will be working with me from now on. We have a field mission tomorrow, so you have one more night to familiarize yourself with these rules and regulations. Leni casually pulled a thick S.H.I.E.L.D agent manual from thin air and placed it on the cardboard box Sky was carrying. One night. Following behind Leni, Sky, looking like a country bumpkin visiting a grand mansion, nearly dropped her jaw upon hearing this. This is just the beginning. After greeting a passing young agent, Leni led Sky into the elevator. Your current identity is that of an unofficial S.H.I.E.L.D agent, with a relatively low clearance level, so don't wander around the agency. Sky nodded in understanding, thinking that was just like an intern. You seem quite popular here? Along the way, Sky saw many people greet Leni. Many of them seemed unfamiliar to Leni, mostly just nodding and smiling. Only when encountering familiar people would Leni chat with them briefly and introduce them to her. It's alright. There's a dining area on the first floor, and the food is free, but you have to finish it. Leading Sky to the door of a lounge, she gestured for her to use the wristband on her wrist to open the door. My room is next to yours. You can come see me anytime, but only if I'm at the station. Sky awkwardly hugged her suitcase, turning to try and place her wrist on the scanner by the door. Beep. Welcome home, Miss Sky. A mechanical female electronic voice sounded, and Sky was taken aback. She had a home now? Seeing that the other woman couldn't open the door, Leni pushed open the door and went in first. There are cameras in the living room and office area, so be careful. But don't worry, there aren't any in the bedroom or bathroom. S.H.I.E.L.D isn't that weird. Pointing to the security camera in the corner of the living room, Leni plopped down on the sofa. The layout of the room was rather compact, it was more like a studio than a living room. Various books and electronic devices were scattered throughout the room, and almost all the furnishings were arranged according to Sky's preferences. Especially those 2 top-of-the-line computers and multiple large monitors, they practically knew Sky's preferences inside and out. How is it going? Time was a bit tight, this is all the department can do for now, but it should meet your needs, right? Sky was so surprised she couldn't speak, the cardboard box slipping from her hands and falling to the ground with a thud. Oh. Signing that agreement was definitely the best decision I've ever made. She hurriedly picked up the box and placed it on the table beside her, heading straight for the 2 computers. Don't be so sure of yourself. Leni took the thick agent's manual from Sky's box and handed it back to her. Let me make this clear from the start, since you've chosen to join S.H.I.E.L.D, you have to abide by the rules here. Leni bent down to let Sky see her face, her tone serious. As long as your abilities are outstanding, S.H.I.E.L.D can allow you to act unconventionally, but only if you don't cause trouble for others. Leni reached out and opened the agent's manual in Sky's hand. A line of handwritten text on the title page caught her eye. The world is full of sin, lies, pain, and death, and you have nowhere to escape but to face it head-on. The question is when you do it, how you deal with it, and what kind of person you want to become. Phil Callison tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. I expect you to be at the door on time. We're going on a long trip. Leni didn't explain to Sky where they were going, she was coming anyway, so she could tell her tomorrow. Leni left, leaving Sky alone in the house. Looking at the camera in the corner, Sky decided against hacking it. She picked up a cardboard box, arranged her belongings one by one, and looked at the agent's manual she had placed aside. What kind of person do I want to become? What time is it? The next morning, Sky, who had slept through the night clutching the thick agent's manual, opened her eyes blankly. 6:33. Sky sat bolt upright in bed and rushed into the bathroom. Damn it. It's all because that damn bed was too comfortable. She'd fallen asleep while reading last night without even realizing it. Sky quickly washed up, barely putting on makeup, as she usually didn't pay much attention to such things. After quickly combing her hair, Sky changed into clean clothes, grabbed her phone, and rushed out of the room. She opened the door to find Leni standing there, holding a tablet. 19 minutes, so. I thought you were planning to sleep until 6:50. Sky glanced at the screen on the tablet and saw it displayed a view of her own living room. Ignoring her little gesture, Leni put the tablet away. Let's go downstairs for dinner first, and I'll introduce you to the other members of our mission. Sky remained silent, her eyes still fixed on Leni's right hand. She had witnessed Leni use that magical ability many times before, often in public. Aside from glancing at what she might pull out, the people around her didn't seem particularly concerned. Does S.H.I.E.L.D have many special ability users like you? Leni glanced at her. Clearly, this guy had misunderstood. No, to be precise, I'm currently the only one as special as me. If Clint's 18 consecutive perfect shots in golf count as a superpower, then he is. My public identity within the agency is a special ability user, possessing a personal storage space. I can carry a lot of weapons, supplies, and equipment, which is probably why I'm quite popular within the agency. Leni didn't reveal that she was S.H.I.E.L.D's alchemy consultant. Sometimes, it's better to maintain a bit of mystery. A special ability user, huh? That's certainly a very convenient ability. Sky seemed thoughtful. Now she understood why so many people knew Leni. Such a convenient ability must make missions much safer. We could bring a few more guns, a few grenades, etc. By the way, you said yesterday we were going on a long trip today. Where are we going? Sky still didn't quite understand what S.H.I.E.L.D actually did. Although Callison said it was for world peace, who would believe such empty rhetoric? Like the CIA, which claims to maintain world peace but is actually the world's biggest drug lord. Aren't those lines just slogans politicians always use? Yesterday, this guy said that joining them would involve frequently encountering very dangerous things. Could they be going to Afghanistan today? Or Iraq? Leni glanced at the clearly timid Sky and chuckled. Don't worry, this mission shouldn't be life-threatening, it's just a trip to the Arctic. Oh, if it's not life-threatening, that's good. Sky breathed a sigh of relief and nodded, following Leni's gaze to the elevator display. Wait a minute. Where did you just say we were going? Chapter 130. Callison's flying skills are indeed not very good. Hello everyone, I'm Sky. Following Renee to the dining table and taking her seat, Sky put down her plate and greeted the others. She had met these people yesterday, though she had looked a little disheveled then. Simmons. Sky could immediately tell from the unique way the two from the science group introduced themselves that their relationship was special. Just call me Mester. Sitting opposite Sky, Mester adjusted her glasses and greeted her with a bright smile. After a few introductions, they were acquainted. The other three had obviously already heard about Sky joining S.H.I.E.L.D and were equally curious about her background. However, after hearing that Sky's file was marked with 084, they all tacitly refrained from mentioning it again. Furthermore, Fitz and Simmons, after hearing that Renee had specifically requested Sky to join S.H.I.E.L.D, looked at Sky with eyes practically spitting fire with jealousy. Mester had met Miss Renee before them and even managed to get her autograph. Why is this new hacker also being favored by Miss Leni? They want to be Miss Leni's subordinates too. Ha ha ha, Sky could only awkwardly laugh it off in the face of their undisguised jealousy. Alright, hurry up and eat, we should be leaving soon. Unable to bear it any longer, Leni had to reprimand the three of them. By the way, where's Agent Callison? Fitz, who had arrived the earliest, hadn't seen Callison yet and was a little puzzled. He went to pick up our pilot. I wonder what kind of benefits Callison offered to get that agent to be our pilot. Everyone was a little confused. Was it really that hard to get a pilot? Leni didn't explain and took a sip of her coffee. As the saying goes, speak of the devil, and he appears. Before Leni could even put down her coffee, Callison arrived. Good morning, everyone. Allow me to introduce our pilot for this mission, Agent Melinda May. Everyone looked behind Callison and saw that the person who came was a female agent who looked to be around 30 years old. Just call me May. Melinda nodded expressionlessly to everyone, acknowledging their greeting. Then, May turned her gaze to Sky, sizing her up without saying anything. Hello, I'm Sky. Feeling a little uneasy under her gaze, Sky awkwardly raised her hand in greeting. Seeing the slightly awkward atmosphere between the two, the others assumed May was bothered by Sky's unexpected addition to the mission, and quickly introduced themselves. May remained expressionless, saying indifferently, "Now that you've introduced yourselves, I'm going to the hangar. You'd better hurry." Ignoring Callison's somewhat embarrassed expression, May turned and left. "Alright, don't worry about it. May doesn't dislike you. This is just her personality. She's actually a very reliable person." Finishing her coffee, Leni gestured for the others to hurry up. The group exchanged glances, unsure why Melinda was acting so coldly. However, there were many strange personalities in S.H.I.E.L.D, so they didn't find it unusual. Sky, however, sensed something strange in Melinda's gaze. Her intuition told her that Melinda might know something. She secretly resolved to find a chance to talk to this Ice Queen. The Quinjet? Following Callison into the underground hangar of S.H.I.E.L.D headquarters, Leni looked at the massive machine before her with some surprise. The futuristic turbojet engine and the folding wings, perfectly suited for carrier-based aircraft, were striking. Leni immediately recognized it as S.H.I.E.L.D's signature aircraft, the Quinjet. Yet, it was just deployed recently. Callison nodded, clearly pleased with the behemoth. "That's good. I thought we'd have to ride in that old C-130 again." With the Quinjet, their mission was much easier. After all, it was a proper transport aircraft, far superior to those cramped ordinary helicopters. The group, carrying their luggage, arrived at the tail of the Quinjet, where staff were loading supplies and equipment into the transport plane. These items were provided by S.H.I.E.L.D to their partner for this Arctic expedition, the icebreaker Polaris. Leni had already stored the necessary supplies and equipment in the Void warehouse. Furthermore, to facilitate travel in the Arctic region, she had also stored 2 well-fueled snowmobiles in the warehouse. For the next few months, they would spend most of their time in the Quinjet. They would only return to the Polaris when they needed to rest. The rest of the time would be spent searching. After loading everything, everyone took their seats in the Quinjet. Leni plopped down in the co-pilot's seat. "Could you teach me how to fly this thing?" May, also wearing thick aviator sunglasses, glanced at Leni, a rare, faint smile appearing on her face. "Okay, but Callison didn't teach you?" Leni glanced at Callison behind her, who was pretending not to hear, and said helplessly, "He wouldn't teach me these things. As far as I know, his flying skills aren't that great." May followed Leni's gaze and looked at Callison as well. Seeing the slight embarrassment on his face, she chuckled. "His flying skills are indeed not that great." Agent May gave a thumbs up to the ground crew beside her, indicating that they could start. The ground crew outside the cockpit returned the thumbs up and then quickly moved away from the fighter jet. "Everyone, fasten your seatbelts." With Melinda's order, the ceiling on the top of the Quinjet gradually opened to both sides, and the midday sun shone directly into the cockpit. From the outside, the circular helipad surrounding the S.H.I.E.L.D Trident building was now opening to both sides. Looking down, one could clearly see the Quinjet slowly rising from the ground. As Melinda kept flipping switches, the Quinjet's 2 turbojet engines started. "Let's go." As soon as the words left her lips, the lift generated by the turbine engine exceeded the critical value, and the entire fighter jet began to lift off the ground and ascend vertically. Once the jet reached a certain altitude, Melinda gently pushed the throttle stick. The Quinjet's tail engines emitted dazzling red light, several Mach rings formed, and the jet shot into the sky. Whoosh! The powerful thrust of the fighter jet was far more intense than driving a high-powered muscle car. Leni couldn't help but exclaim excitedly. She absolutely loved this feeling. Grandma Orange's condition has stabilized. Father, diagnosed with heart disease, is currently hospitalized in the county hospital in our hometown. Thank you all for your support. Chapter 131, My first mission was to find Captain America. Is that all? Following Melinda's instructions, Leni switched the Quinjet from manual to autopilot, then looked at Melinda. Yes, you're already capable of handling ordinary flight missions independently. Just a little more practice on takeoffs and landings. Noticing Melinda's emphasis, Leni chuckled. Understood. Just now, Leni's powerful learning ability allowed her to quickly learn how to operate the Quinjet. This left S.H.I.E.L.D, who had been sitting behind her the whole time, speechless. She had listened out of a curiosity the entire way. You learned it after just one listen? S.H.I.E.L.D gently nudged Leni's arm, asking incredulously. Such a complex thing, and you? Leni turned around somewhat blankly, meeting the strange gazes of the science team members behind her. Is it that difficult? Fitz and Simmons exchanged a glance, ignoring Leni's question. Instead, they pretended not to notice and launched into a rambling discussion of various physical laws. Remember the first law of thermodynamics? The universe doesn't create new energy. Old energy doesn't disappear either. But I think. Mester picked up the tablet and started swiping around on it, then communicated with Callison beside her in a language she couldn't understand. Whether Callison understood or not, he just nodded seriously. Yeah, no problem. Obviously, I'm not the only one who thinks this thing is hard to fly. S.H.I.E.L.D shrugged. She'd seen everyone's reactions, which confirmed one thing for her: Leni's talent was abnormally strong. Melinda's lips curled into a faint smile, but it vanished quickly. We're expected to reach the Arctic Circle in a little over an hour. I've already contacted Captain Art F. Morgan of the North Star. We'll be spending the next few months on his ship. Callison pulled up an operable display screen on the cabin bulkhead, showing their current location and speed. Leni unbuckled her seatbelt and retrieved a tablet from thin air, connecting it to the onboard computer. Then, with a swipe of her hand on the tablet, Leni gained control of the controllable display. For this mission, we first need to search this area in northern Canada. Although the Russian expedition has already thoroughly searched it, we'll go there first and scan it with our equipment, just to be safe. The equipment Leni mentioned was actually a large metal detector specially prepared by S.H.I.E.L.D Science Department for Callison's investigation team. It was already installed on the bottom of the Quinjet. All they needed to do was activate it and fly the jet low over the ice. The system would automatically scan beneath the ice for large metal objects, its exploration depth not comparable to the massive device installed on the Polaris, but sufficient for Leni and her team. After that, we'll head to Colonel Morgan's North Star by 6 p.m. and land on his icebreaker. Retrieving information about the North Star and its crew, Leni stated seriously, our mission is publicly stated as a search for the missing pilot of the S.H.I.E.L.D plane in the Arctic and the recovery of the crashed aircraft. She sent a clearly fake mission briefing to everyone's personal terminals, gesturing for them to memorize it quickly. The captain of the North Star knows the purpose of our mission. He's also with S.H.I.E.L.D. Leni then projected another encrypted S.H.I.E.L.D. agent's file onto the large screen, displaying Colonel Art F. Morgan's detailed information. As for the other crew members, they're all military personnel. Given our relationship with the military, please be mindful during the mission. Leni then looked at S.H.I.E.L.D, who seemed somewhat bewildered. I'm talking to you, S.H.I.E.L.D. Don't cause any trouble. You can do whatever you want on the plane, but behave yourself on the ship. S.H.I.E.L.D, slightly confused by being called out, pointed to herself. Wait a minute. If this mission is a fake one, then what is our real mission? To turn this icebreaker against us? Facing a bewildered S.H.I.E.L.D and a suspicious look from Callison, Leni coughed, pretending she hadn't finished speaking. I was just about to say that. This operation is actually to search for and salvage a suspected World War II German warplane that crashed in the Arctic. If we're lucky, perhaps we can find the war hero who led the Allies to defeat Germany, Mr. Steve Rogers. A newspaper with the date Captain America disappeared clearly marked on the large screen appeared, the date boldly displayed, March 5, 1945. Steve Rogers is. S.H.I.E.L.D felt the name sounded familiar, and seeing Rogers's picture printed in a very large section of the newspaper, she remembered who he was. Captain America? S.H.I.E.L.D stood up in surprise, looking at Callison in disbelief. So Captain America's story is true? After receiving an affirmative nod, S.H.I.E.L.D slowly sat back down. My first mission is to find this war hero? Ignoring his mutterings, Leanne drew a straight line on the tablet. Based on the intelligence we had before, combined with the location of the plane wreckage we found, we can roughly deduce this flight path. This path was derived from the location where Mr. Howard Stark salvaged the Tesseract years ago, connecting it to the location of the newly discovered plane wreckage. It had a certain degree of credibility, but that didn't mean Captain America's plane necessarily crashed along this path. Therefore, Leanne drew a circle around the flight path, which appeared to cover almost a third of the Arctic ice cap. We need to search along this route, The approximate search area is roughly like this. Callison looked at the enormous circle, somewhat speechless. Searching within this area, 3 months probably wouldn't be enough. Ahem. Don't be stressed, everyone. This area is just approximate. Believe me, we can complete the mission quickly. He coughed lightly, signaling to Fitz, who seemed about to speak, not to take it too seriously, and clapped his hands. In short, this mission requires us to face the harsh cold and polar days of the next 3 months alone, and we also need to ensure our personal safety. After all, this isn't the polar bear's hibernation period. Skye was still somewhat bewildered. What exactly was S.H.I.E.L.D hiding? If Captain America really existed, then wouldn't the legendary Red Skull also exist? And what about Hydra? Chapter 132. Very good, congratulations on successfully killing me. Approaching the designated area, reduce altitude. Melinda deftly adjusted the aircraft's nosedive, gradually descending, and signaled the others to prepare. Hearing this, Leni adjusted the cabin temperature, then retrieved pre-prepared down jackets from the air and distributed them to the others. We've now reached the Arctic Circle. We won't be able to see the sunset for the next few days. We'll search here for now, and then depart at 5 p.m. to rendezvous with the Polaris. Everyone agreed. Fitz and Mester activated the metal detectors on the bottom of the Quinjet. Simmons, specializing in biochemistry, focused on the life detectors. Besides searching, she had some things she wanted to do on this mission. Observing the Arctic's biological ecosystem was a promising topic. Only Skye seemed a little lost, everyone else had their own tasks, while she felt like a bystander. What do you need me to do? Leni glanced around the cabin, realizing there wasn't really anything suitable for her. Even Callison was monitoring the ocean currents beneath the ice on the display screen. After thinking for a moment, Leanne reached into the air and retrieved a P-30L pistol, leading Skye to the back of the cockpit. You've finished reading the agent's handbook? Skye nodded reluctantly. She had read it, but she didn't know how much she remembered. Leanne didn't care, as long as you didn't violate the core rules, the rest was dispensable. In that case, I'll give you your first lesson today. Have you ever handled a gun before? Skye watched Leanne skillfully disassemble and reassemble the pistol, shaking her head to indicate she hadn't. Leanne could understand, being protected to that extent by S.H.I.E.L.D, it would be strange if she handled a gun. This girl probably hadn't even been in a relationship. This pistol is the P-30L, manufactured by the German company HK. You can think of it as an upgraded version of the classic USP. Upon hearing USP, Skye immediately perked up, exclaiming excitedly, I know USP. I've played CS::GO. Startled by her exclamation, Leni forgot where she was in the conversation and simply took out another Glock 19 from the inventory. Since you mentioned CS::GO, I happen to have a Glock here, so I'll explain it to you both. Leni disassembled the Glock as well, placing the parts of both guns on the supply crate. Both of these pistols are 9mm caliber, and they both use the universal Parabellum 9mm pistol cartridge, making them very versatile. Leni slowly guided Skye step by step through assembling the two guns. The P-30L has a larger frame, which I personally prefer, but it might not be suitable for you. I suggest you use this Glock. After Skye awkwardly completed the assembly, Leni began teaching her the correct grip for the pistol and the key points to note when shooting. They went back and forth for a long time, until Skye fully understood the differences between the two guns, as well as the basic elements of loading, safety, and reloading. Callison, help me correct his shooting posture. Leni pulled a target from thin air and stood at the rear of the cockpit. Now, aim as I taught you, looking through the rear sight, aligning the front sight with the center of the target. Hearing this, Callison came over and checked Skye's Glock, confirming that the chamber and magazine were empty. Skye didn't care much, she wasn't worried about being out of ammunition. Following Leni's instructions, she raised her pistol and aimed at the target Leni was holding in one hand. Maintain steady breathing, control your arm, and pull the trigger the instant the front sight aligns with a bullseye. Skye didn't reply, slowly calming her breathing. Don't close your eyes, keep both eyes open, Callison instructed from the side. Hearing this, Skye reopened her left eye, struggling to control the Glock's fluctuating front sight. Then, her index finger swiftly pulled the trigger, a crisp click echoing from the chamber. Very good, congratulations on successfully killing me. Leni put down the target paper, She had just precisely sensed a muzzle rise and fall of Sky's gun using the radar system, and was just joking. Casually retrieving a bullet from the void, Leni tossed it to Kelson. Load the bullet, chamber it, and try again. Kelson, startled as he caught a bullet, was about to say something when Leni summoned a void storage. Having witnessed Leni's abilities, Kelson knew what she was up to. But he was still somewhat worried, especially in the confined space of the cockpit. What if a ricochet occurred and Leni didn't have time to store the bullet in her storage? Don't worry, I can store anything I can see, Leni said firmly, gesturing for Kelson to hand the bullet to Sky. Melinda, who had been slowly piloting the Quinjet at low altitude after hearing the commotion, also looked over in surprise. Was it really necessary to go this far? Fitz was the first to disagree, Mester frowned deeply, and Simmons was speechless with shock, her face pale. I disagree. Putting aside the immense risk of holding a target, how can you guarantee Sky's bullet will hit your space? I can guarantee it. Leni glanced at Fitz, then looked at Sky, who was trembling as she gripped the Glock. I believe you can do it. Sky was on the verge of tears. You believe in me, but I don't believe in myself. Kelson looked at Leni, ultimately saying nothing more, and reached out to take Sky's pistol. He removed the magazine, loaded the 9mm round, and then reloaded it. Sky looked blankly at Kelson, her trembling hands hesitant to take the pistol he offered. I can't. Seeing Sky's hands shaking like leaves, Kelson felt a pang of pity. Before he could speak, the outrageous Leni preemptively said, if you can't trust your teammates, if you can't give the same trust to those who trust you, then you don't deserve to join S.H.I.E.L.D, and you don't deserve to know the truth of the past. Sky was stunned, and so were the others. Kelson's anger gradually subsided. He understood Leni's meaning and reached out to help Sky raise her gun. Fitz looked incredulous, frantically trying to find something to shield himself and Simmons. Simmons's eyes were somewhat unfocused, his pale face lost in thought. Mester didn't move, but subconsciously hid her right hand in her pocket, a hint of amusement hidden behind her thick-rimmed glasses. Melinda, piloting the Quinjet, slowly leveled the flight. She didn't believe Sky would fire. But in the current situation, the others clearly had no time to pay attention to the detectors and sensors. She didn't want to fly back and re-examine the area later. Sky was almost in tears, looking pleadingly at the others, but apart from Kelson, whose face was ashen, no one was willing to help her. I really can't. Chapter 133 Welcome to S.H.I.E.L.D, Agent Sky. Leni frowned, somewhat disappointed. While she admitted she'd been somewhat forced into this, she had her reasons. If this is all you're capable of, May, after we reach the North Star, please take her back. I'll have the department help her forget everything. Hearing this, Melinda glanced back at Leni, her expressionless face revealing no emotion. Okay. She had no objection. In fact, Melinda had initially refused to let Sky, an ordinary person, join their mission. It was only after Kelson repeatedly assured her that he and Leni would take good care of the girl that Melinda reluctantly agreed. As for taking her back, for me, it was just a matter of working overtime. A round trip empty at full speed was nothing to her. Watching Sky's gloomy face, Leni still hadn't seen the girl raise her gun, and sighed. Fine, Kelson, contact S.H.I.E.L.D and have him prepare the memory erasure device. We'll take her back later. Click. A crisp firing pin release echoed through the cabin, stunning everyone, including Sky herself. Melinda paused, then withdrew her right hand from the throttle lever, a slight smile unconsciously playing on her lips. The three members of the science team were still trying to figure out what was happening, and Fitz hadn't even dared to look. Only Kelson, Leni, and Sky herself understood what had just occurred. Just moments ago, when Leni clearly expressed her disappointment in Sky and was about to send her back to S.H.I.E.L.D, Sky, who had been somewhat bewildered, suddenly raised both hands, aiming the sights at the bullseye without hesitation and pulling the trigger. The entire process was fluid and without the slightest hesitation. However, the expected deafening gunshot didn't occur. Instead, there was a crisp firing pin release. Leni smiled, and Kelson smiled too. My evaluation is failing. Leni retracted the target paper into the air and slowly walked to Sky. Reaching out, she took the Glock pistol that Sky had been gripping tightly from her hand and patted Sky on the shoulder. Welcome to S.H.I.E.L.D, Agent Sky. Ignoring the stares from the others, Leni smiled, reached into the air to retrieve sunglasses, put them on, and returned to the co-pilot's seat in the Quinjet. So I don't have to work overtime? Melinda glanced at Leni, who had her back to the others, and unusually teased her. Haha, thank you for your hard work. Leni gazed at the sun, which was gradually sinking on the horizon but showed no sign of setting further, and slowly exhaled a breath of stale air. Her road is still long. Meanwhile, Sky, still somewhat bewildered, stared blankly at her palms, which were white from gripping the magazine too tightly. What? She was welcome to S.H.I.E.L.D? And she clearly watched Callison load the bullet into the magazine, so how come there were no bullets? Callison smiled and patted Sky on the shoulder, but unlike Leni, he didn't keep her in suspense. Instead, he held out his other hand for Sky to see. The gleaming 9mm parabellum bullet was still in Callison's hand. When? Sky's eyes widened in disbelief. Just as I reached out to help you raise the gun. Callison demonstrated again. It turned out that just as Callison raised his hand to help Sky raise the gun, taking advantage of Sky's distraction, Callison quickly ejected the bullet and hid the unfired round in his palm. Therefore, when Sky fired the gun later, there was no bullet in the chamber. All anyone heard was the crisp sound of the firing pin. This is the first lesson Leni taught you. Callison held the Glock pistol in his hand, examined it, chambered it, checked the chamber, and pulled the trigger. Only after confirming there were no bullets in the chamber did Callison place the pistol back on the supply crate. This lesson is divided into several parts. First, basic pistol shooting, which you did very well, except for the first shot which had a slightly large muzzle drift. Second, trust in your comrades. Although the process was a bit absurd, your performance was still good. Then, trust in your weapon. Here I want you to remember one thing: don't easily hand over your weapon to anyone, because you never know what they might do to it, which could kill you. Finally, your execution of your superior's absurd orders. Before teaching you how to shoot, Leni repeatedly emphasized not to point the gun at friendly forces. Although it was her order, you had the right to question it, so you also performed poorly in this aspect. Callison patted Sky on the shoulder with satisfaction. Overall, your performance was acceptable. I would rate you as passing. Although Leni said Sky failed, he knew it was just Leni being arrogant. This is absolutely ridiculous. Sky shouted, feeling like a fool. What is all this? Is this even reasonable? What's going on in Leni's head? Callison chuckled inwardly. While I also think Leni's approach is absurd, she went through the same thing. This so-called first lesson theory must have been copied by Leni from the Rapid Reaction Force. He'd heard the story of how Rumlow tricked Leni on her first day at S.H.I.E.L.D. He just hadn't expected Leni to modify and apply it to Sky. S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't need mission machines that just follow orders. They need highly skilled agents who are quick-witted and composed under pressure. S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't need you to complete missions 100% according to plan, because plans can never keep up with changes, and we can't be rigid. Completing missions requires wisdom, courage, and experience. All three are indispensable. Now you have courage, and you're not lacking in wisdom either. All you lack is experience. Callison picked up the Glock pistol and handed it back to Sky, giving her an encouraging look before returning to his seat. Sky glanced thoughtfully at Leni in the passenger seat, a strange look in her eyes. Turning back, Sky disassembled and reassembled the Glock, practicing cocking it using the stance Callison had taught her. Fitz, clutching a suitcase, peeked out from behind, looking at Simmons, whose expression had softened. What happened? Simmons rolled his eyes at him, then turned to Leni in the passenger seat, his gaze meaningful. Meanwhile, Mester discreetly withdrew her right hand from her clothes, refocusing her attention on the detector's display screen. Wait, what happened? Can anyone tell me? Chapter 134. Thank you, handsome. You look really strong. Nothing new here. Should we go down and check again? Mester controlled the probe, repeatedly scanning the ice layer, thoroughly investigating the area where the Russian expedition had discovered the wreckage. Leni glanced at the ground. Traces of the Russians' activity were still faintly visible. Never mind, it's about time. Let's rendezvous with the Polaris first, and continue the search tomorrow. Those people are waiting for us to deliver supplies. With Callison's approval, Melinda slowly raised the fighter jet, pushed the throttle, and headed straight for the Polaris. The cabin temperature is dropping. Everyone, put on your down jackets so you don't catch a cold during landing. Simmons adjusted the cabin temperature and urged everyone on. When the Quinjet reached the area where the Polaris icebreaker was located, Melinda established communication. Polaris, this is Aegis 13. We are about to reach your ship's location. Requesting landing. Repeat. Polaris. She called out twice crisply to ensure the other party could hear her. Then came Captain Ardev Morgan's magnetic voice. Polaris received. The landing pad is cleared for your arrival. Welcome. After receiving permission, Melinda exchanged pleasantries with the other side and then slowly lowered the fighter jet's altitude. Activate the turbojet engines and reduce turbojet engine power. Melinda explained to Leni verbally as she maneuvered the fighter jet down. Pay attention to your speed, the Polaris is moving. Leni didn't blink, afraid of missing a step. Do not completely shut down the turbojet engines before confirming a successful landing, then slowly reduce the turbojet engine power. Melinda controlled the control stick with her left hand and continuously adjusted the engine thrust with her right. Pay attention to the altimeter and level indicator, adjust the fuselage attitude, deploy the landing gear, and remember to make sure the rear wheels touch down first. The Quinjet fighter jet descended to about 10 meters from the Polaris's landing pad, its nose lifted, and the wings gradually tapered. Retract the wings, maintain fuselage stability, and after confirming the rear wheels have made contact with the ground, slowly lower the nose. And so, to the astonishment of the North Star crew, Melinda landed the Quinjet smoothly on the helipad at the stern. Shut down the turbojet engines and turbine engines in sequence, perform a self-check of the onboard systems. If there are no abnormalities, this flight is complete. Giving a thumbs up to the crew member who came to guide her from the cockpit, Melinda then looked at Leni. Well, got it? Leni frowned. She admitted that landing this advanced Quinjet smoothly was much more difficult than flying it. I got it, but it's difficult to operate. Melinda nodded, unconcerned. Just get it. If you're not familiar with the operation, you can practice more. How about I have you try tomorrow? Before Leni could say anything, Callison couldn't sit still any longer. Landing training can wait. Let's go down first, don't keep Colonel Morgan waiting. This is not like piloting a fighter jet for stable flight. Letting Leni, who is handling the Quinjet for the first time, handle takeoff and landing is really too childish. Melinda glanced at him and shrugged indifferently. Whatever, you're in charge, you decide. Leni also knew that this couldn't be rushed, and it was more important to deal with the important matters first. Getting up and returning to the cabin, Leni took the down jacket from Simmons and put it on. After making sure everyone was ready, she opened the tail hatch of the fighter jet. As the hydraulic hatch slowly opened, a gust of cold wind blew in through the gap. Everyone couldn't help but shiver. Even though the cabin temperature had been lowered beforehand, the perceived temperature outside in the Arctic was still slightly lower. After the hatch was fully open, Callison was the first to walk down and greeted the crew of the Polaris who were waiting for them outside. Colonel Morgan, long time no see. Upon seeing Callison, Colonel Ardev Morgan's face immediately lit up with a smile, and he warmly greeted Callison by shaking his hand. Long time no see, Agent Callison, welcome. His expression was neither genuine nor feigned, but the two seemed exceptionally close, like brothers who had risked their lives for each other. Leni chuckled inwardly, following behind Callison, taking off her sunglasses and extending her hand as well. Hello, Colonel Morgan, I'm Leni Testarossa, the security officer for the investigation team. You can just call me Leni. Seeing a blonde, blue-eyed young woman, Colonel Morgan's eyes lit up, and he quickly extended his hand. Hello, just call me Captain or Captain Morgan, no need to be so formal, welcome. They exchanged greetings, and that was it. After all, they would be spending the next few months together, so a little pretense was necessary. They noticed that the other members of the investigation team, except for Fitz, were all women, and all of them were exceptionally beautiful. The usually aloof male crew members were all beaming with joy, rushing forward to help with their luggage. Leni didn't mind, their bags were just for show, containing nothing valuable. They figured if someone offered to help, it wouldn't be heavy anyway. Fitz, however, was a little jealous, his face practically overflowing with envy as he watched Simmons surrounded by two men clearly much stronger than him. Thanks, it's not heavy, thank you for your help. Simmons wanted to politely decline the two burly men, but his bag had already been snatched away, so he could only smile helplessly. Mester and Sky were also surrounded by two men. But judging from their ease, they seemed to be able to handle them. Mester, thank you, handsome, you've worked hard. Sky, thank you very much, You look really strong. Melinda's situation was different. Her cool and dashing mature female pilot aura completely overshadowed all the other girls present. A group of people immediately surrounded her, all seemingly eager to get acquainted with her. However, unaware of Melinda's temperament, they were all rebuffed. Ahem. Jason. Go and load the supplies. Don't keep the guests waiting. It's so cold, what's the point of them standing outside? Colonel Morgan, unable to bear the horny behavior of these testosterone-fueled crew members, reprimanded them. Jason, the crew member whose name was called, reluctantly replied, "Yes, my valiant captain." Then, ignoring the reluctant looks from the others, he pulled over several men who had also been rebuffed by Melinda. They fetched the ship's forklift and busied themselves unloading the pallets of supplies from the engine room. Only after all the supplies were unloaded did Melinda close the engine room door. Don't mind these guys. They've just not seen a woman in a long time. I'll keep them in check, don't worry. Colonel Morgan looked embarrassed. S.H.I.E.L.D. was different from the military, and these people were clearly not someone he could afford to mess with. Besides, this mission was extremely important, and he didn't want to cause any trouble because of these guys' lustful desires. It's alright, I understand. Let's go into the cabin, it's really too cold outside. Yes, please come in. Chapter 135 is meant to be our way of thanking them for their help. Entering the cabin, the chilly wind outside subsided, and everyone felt slightly better. There was no other way, they had flown directly from the warm, low-latitude temperate zone to the high-latitude Arctic Circle. The temperature plummeted from 20 degrees Celsius to minus 20 degrees Celsius. They hadn't even had time to change their clothes, so they had to use their thick down jackets for the time being. If it weren't for prior preparation and the cabin temperature being lowered beforehand, they would probably have caught a cold by now. This is your rest area. I had it prepared beforehand. The men will stay with us, and you women will have to make do for now. This ship isn't like other places, Captain Morgan said, leading everyone to the rest area inside the cabin. He opened a door and pointed to a clearly makeshift rest area. Inside were 3 bunk beds, 2 tables, and a set of lockers. The space wasn't large, but it shouldn't be too cramped for the girls. Looking at the layout, Leni felt a strong sense of déjà vu, like a school dormitory. Besides being relatively clean, there was nothing else. Fortunately, the cabin wasn't cold. Thanks to the ship's 6 massive diesel engines, a steady stream of warm air was supplied to every part of the cabin by the central air conditioning. At least here they didn't need to wear down jackets all the time and could get a good night's sleep. Captain Morgan specified the time they could use the shower room and assured them that no one would disturb them. Leni nodded. After all, they were asking for his help, so it was only natural to follow his arrangements. Several burly men helped them put down their luggage, initially intending to linger under the guise of helping. But under the captain's fierce glare, they reluctantly got up to say goodbye to the ladies. I have other matters to attend to, so I won't bother you any longer. If you need anything, feel free to contact me anytime via the intercom on the wall. You all get some rest. Kicking the last crew member to emerge from the room, Captain Morgan chuckled and greeted everyone before leaving with Carlson and Fitz. Leni smiled as she watched them leave, keeping the APG-63 radar system active. Only after confirming that Carlson and the other man were safe did they return to their cabin and sit on the hard beds. They're both alright, we don't need to worry about them, let's unpack our luggage first. The girls had no objections and each chose their beds. Melinda, knowing she was the oldest and strongest, volunteered to sleep on the lower bunk closer to the door. The 2 female researchers, Simmons and Meister, were arranged by Leni to sleep at the very back of the cabin, with Sky sleeping above her. Their strength was lacking, and their self-defense capabilities in the face of danger were poor, so Leni was worried about them. Melinda, already tired of field missions, wasn't picky about the accommodations here. After all, she had experienced much harsher environments before. Leni was the same. In her previous life, whether as a female gunner or an ordinary person, sleeping in the wild or in cheap cubicles was commonplace. As for Meister, Leni didn't know, but judging from her appearance, she should have experienced dormitory life before. Simmons, on the other hand, seemed indifferent at the moment, more excited about the shared accommodations. It was just a matter of whether this excitement would wear off and whether Simmons, who seemed like a well-bred young lady, would find it difficult to adapt. After making the beds, Leni retrieved the others' personal belongings from the void. Cosmetics aside, sunscreen was a must. The Arctic Circle's months-long polar day meant that even with relatively low temperatures, the 24-hour continuous ultraviolet radiation was still quite torturous. Lying on their backs, none of them spoke. Even Simmons, who had been excitedly chattering just moments before, felt somewhat tired. Melinda, who had been flying all day, had already closed her eyes for a nap. Skye, however, was used to living alone in her car and wasn't having any trouble adjusting. It was just that the constant stream of information over the past 2 days was making it difficult for her to sleep now that she finally had some free time. S.H.I.E.L.D, the Arctic Survey Team, Captain America, Hydra, the barrage of information left her feeling overwhelmed and confused. Which path should she take? She had impulsively decided to join S.H.I.E.L.D to find out more about her past, but now that she knew what S.H.I.E.L.D actually did, Skye wasn't sure if she could handle it, or even if she could uncover the secrets of the past. Before, she was ignorant and therefore fearless. Now, knowing some secrets, Skye was somewhat hesitant. At dinner time, everyone went to the North Star's mess hall with the crew to eat dinner together. Callison went to socialize with Captain Morgan, so Fitz had no choice but to take his tray and sit down next to the women. Although I expected the crew's lounge wouldn't be very nice, I didn't expect it to be this bad. Fitz sighed, taking a bite of beef under the questioning gazes of the others. This ship was commissioned in 1976, which is about the same age as my father. Even though I was prepared, it still surprised me. He scooped up a spoonful of beef stew with potatoes and put it in his mouth to fill his hungry stomach. Your cabin must have been specially arranged by the captain. They haven't had any female visitors for a long time, so it must have taken a lot of effort to make that room. Leni nodded slowly. She could tell that the room's furnishings were obviously temporary. What are you trying to say? Fitz shook his head, indicating he didn't mean anything by it. I just think that compared to us, these ordinary crew members are really working hard. Maybe we should bring more supplies or other emotional support. Leni remained non-committal, gesturing for Fitz to continue. I think I could help them upgrade their satellite network, at least that way they could video chat with their families or play games during their rest time. Leni had no objection to this, patting Fitz on the shoulder. In that case, do it if you want, consider it a way of thanking them for their help on our behalf. Simmons also nodded encouragingly at Fitz, having confidence in him in this regard. Then it's up to you, Fitz. Receiving affirmation from someone he admired, Fitz breathed a sigh of relief, patting his chest to indicate that he was taking care of it. I can help too. Upon hearing that it involved network technology, Skye, who couldn't immediately find her role in the team, quickly stepped forward. However, when she saw the strange looks everyone was giving her, she suddenly realized that her actions were rather abrupt. He could only give an awkward smile to those around him and obediently sit back down. I mean, probably. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 136. Is it too late for you to take me back now? You guys didn't sleep well either? The next morning, everyone gathered for breakfast, but Callison asked with a slight amusement when he saw the dark circles under the girls' eyes. Although there aren't any major waves here, it's still a bit difficult to fall asleep in this swaying cabin. Leni rubbed her eyes. She hadn't slept well the night before either. Although she couldn't stay awake any longer in the latter half of the night and ran to the system's training ground to hide, sleep deprivation was still inevitable. However, the other girls couldn't escape it. All of them except Melinda suffered from insomnia. Simmons and Skye didn't sleep at all, and with dark circles under their eyes, they looked at Leni and Melinda with resentment. I want to know, you couldn't sleep in the first half of the night either, so how come you fell asleep in the second half? Skye's face was gloomy, and Callison could feel her resentment even from a distance. If you, the reader, have ever had trouble sleeping, you'll understand how Skye felt at that moment. Irritable, anxious, and extremely irritable, the kind of person who could explode at the slightest spark. Leni avoided Skye's gaze, scratching her cheek with her index finger and chuckling awkwardly. Well, I just fell asleep because I was tired, I don't really know. However, this explanation clearly didn't convince the others. Even Melinda gave her a strange look. She hadn't slept well last night either, waking up and falling asleep repeatedly, and was even woken up by the girls in the latter half of the night. When she woke up, she found them staring at Leni with the lights on for ages, but Leni showed no signs of waking up. "We tormented you like that, and you still didn't wake up. If we hadn't seen you were still breathing, we would have almost thought you were dead." The simple-minded Simmons looked at Leni with a similarly resentful expression, but as soon as she said this, S.H.I.E.L.D's expression changed. "She means we tried to wake you yesterday, but you didn't respond at all, and we were worried about you." But Leni wasn't so easily fooled. She narrowed her eyes at S.H.I.E.L.D, then glanced at Simmons, who was completely bewildered. Finally, her gaze fell on Mester, who had long since looked away and was focused on enjoying her breakfast. "What did you do to me last night?" Leni growled fiercely at S.H.I.E.L.D. She was absolutely certain that only S.H.I.E.L.D, with her unorthodox methods, could come up with such a prank. "Did I let it slip?" Simmons belatedly looked at Melinda, and Fitz, who also had dark circles under her eyes, couldn't stand it anymore and pulled her aside. "My goodness, you've almost told me everything." Realizing she had tricked S.H.I.E.L.D, Simmons quickly lowered her head, pretending to be an ostrich. Although it was indeed S.H.I.E.L.D who suggested drawing little turtles on Leni's face last night, S.H.I.E.L.D had ultimately given up on the idea after being persuaded by her and Mester. Well, they later drew the little turtle on Leni's lower back. Mester ate her salad in silence, almost finishing the meager amount of vegetables in her bowl, without daring to look up. S.H.I.E.L.D looked around, two ostriches, one pretending not to know, and two completely useless men. She finally realized the mistake she had made last night. She shouldn't have trusted these two incompetent teammates. They promised to shoulder the burden together if anything went wrong. They promised to be best friends and help each other from now on. And after just one night, they were like plastic? Where was justice? I can explain. S.H.I.E.L.D thought she could still salvage the situation. At least Leni didn't know what they had done. Although she probably wouldn't last until the night. Leni didn't speak, looking at S.H.I.E.L.D with a gloomy expression. Seeing that she didn't say anything for a while, Leni simply got up and went back to their cabin. S.H.I.E.L.D, seeing this, turned ashen-faced and looked pleadingly at Callison and Melinda. "I think you should pick out a good burial plot for yourself now," Fitz said with a hint of schadenfreude. He still felt a little resentful towards this girl who had actually dared to fire a gun in the cabin yesterday, even though he didn't dislike her. "Do you think it's appropriate to make jokes like this now?" Simmons pinched Fitz's ribs hard. Mester was even more direct, putting down her salad bowl and taking out her tablet to book a professional team for S.H.I.E.L.D. "Just in case, I'll book it for you first." "No way, you're serious?" S.H.I.E.L.D was incredulous, never expecting this usually quiet, academic girl to have such a cunning side. "Alright, stop fooling around." Callison, somewhat amused by the girl's antics, had to step in to maintain order. Leni isn't the petty type, she won't mind these little jokes. However, before he could finish speaking, a deafening roar came from the corridor outside the cabin, startling the crew members into exchanging bewildered glances. "S.H.I.E.L.D?" S.H.I.E.L.D jumped in fright at the roar, trembling as she looked at Melinda. "Is it too late for you to fly me back now?" Melinda, who had witnessed the whole thing last night, silently took a sip of her coffee and slowly nodded. "I'll immediately notify the department to prepare your funeral." Fitz, mimicking Mester, took out his tablet and began searching for a good burial plot. "Please help me pick a good place." S.H.I.E.L.D clasped her hands together and bowed to the two of them, but before she could finish the gesture, Leni's voice came from the cabin door. "S.H.I.E.L.D, you're finished. Today I'll show you what I'm capable of." Before she finished speaking, Leni rushed in, heading straight for S.H.I.E.L.D with a menacing look. Callison and Melinda initially wanted to stop her, but after seeing what Leni was holding, they sat back down. Simmons and Mester also breathed a sigh of relief. Upon seeing that Leni was only holding markers in each hand, they simultaneously swallowed back the fear that had been rising in their throats. "Leni. Let me explain. Let me explain." But Leni, consumed by anger, paid no heed, baring her teeth and claws as she reached out to draw marks on S.H.I.E.L.D's face. S.H.I.E.L.D quickly raised her hands to block, desperately resisting Leni's attack with every ounce of her strength. She tilted her head back as far as she could, terrified that the two markers would leave a few marks on her face. Otherwise, her delicate face would be a complete mess. "What are you two watching? Come help. I wasn't the only one drawing last night. If I'm in trouble, you won't escape either." Seeing that she couldn't overcome Leni's strength, S.H.I.E.L.D could only desperately struggle and then plead for help from the two women who were pretending to be ostriches. Simmons and Mr. thought about it, and realized that this was indeed the case. One-on-one, the three of them were no match for Leanne. Abandoning S.H.I.E.L.D now would only allow them to be picked off one by one. The only way to win was to unite and fight together. Realizing this, Simmons and Maester suddenly stood up, each grabbing one of Leanne's hands and trying to snatch the marker from her. Melinda remained calmly seated, slowly sipping her hot coffee, and remarked in unison with Coulson, "Youth is truly wonderful." Orange doesn't know if this kind of comedic slice of life story in a Japanese anime style suits everyone's taste. Comments and suggestions are welcome. Respect. Chapter 137. Should we go to the room? How could this happen? Why does it all end up being my fault? I'm a victim too. S.H.I.E.L.D pouted, rinsing her face with water while looking in the mirror, repeatedly washing off the cat and turtle drawings. Luckily, Leni used water-based markers, which could be easily washed off with water. If she had used oil-based markers, it would have been a different story. S.H.I.E.L.D wouldn't have been able to leave the bathroom anytime soon. Leni crossed her arms, looking at S.H.I.E.L.D, whose face was covered in the most drawings and was the hardest to clean. You guys think you can leave marks on my face? Dream on. Maester and Simmons weren't much better off, though. They were a little better off than S.H.I.E.L.D, having cleaned themselves up much earlier. Only S.H.I.E.L.D's face was practically covered in drawings. Dark circles, a turtle, an old man, a cat face. Leni had drawn on every possible spot, since she was the mastermind. And she had actually held back, not as vicious as S.H.I.E.L.D. The little turtle she left on her lower back was drawn with an oil-based marker. Thankfully, she had makeup remover and alcohol in her storage room, otherwise. In short, this was purely S.H.I.E.L.D's own doing. Wait, why are you so strong? S.H.I.E.L.D dried her face with a towel, giving Renee a strange look. Just now, the three of them, with 6 hands, couldn't restrain Renee. Instead, Renee broke free and defeated them one by one. At first, she didn't think much of it when she was defending herself, but when the three of them exerted force together, S.H.I.E.L.D realized that Renee hadn't even used her full strength. Me? Being an ability user, it's normal to be stronger. Renee didn't explain much, simply attributing it all to her superpowers. Alright, let's go. May is still waiting for us. They'd played around enough, it was time to get down to business. The playful fight had indeed revived the girls' spirits, at least they weren't as lifeless as before. After packing their equipment and clothing, Leni locked the cabin and led the other 2 women to the aft deck of the North Star. A considerable number of people had already gathered there, including Captain Morgan. Leni saw the captain arguing with Coulson from a distance, but it didn't seem like a conflict. She didn't pay much attention, only vaguely hearing words like beer in the cold wind. After greeting the captain and the others, they boarded the aircraft, ready to begin today's search. Leni went to the co-pilot's seat, put on her sunglasses, and signaled to Melinda that they could take off. Giving a thumbs up to the crew beside the aircraft, and confirming that no one was around, Melinda started the turbojet engine, slowly increasing the aircraft's altitude. With the wings spread and the turbojet engine at the tail of the aircraft spewing out a scorching orange-red plume, the Quinjet disappeared from the crew's sight. Watching the black dot gradually disappear into the distance, Colonel Morgan seemed lost in thought. Captain, the technical department has confirmed that they weren't carrying any large equipment or many weapons on the plane. The crew member previously called Jason approached Colonel Morgan and whispered. Should we? No rush. Even if they find the plane, they'll contact me eventually. We can act then. Colonel Morgan, hands behind his back, wore a smug expression on his usually gentle face. Should we go to the rooms? Jason hesitated, gesturing as if reaching into his pocket. Colonel Morgan's expression froze. And he smacked the man beside him on the head in exasperation. Jason winced in pain but dared not cry out. Idiot. Do you really think the S.H.I.E.L.D guys are fools? How much stuff did they bring? They can't tell their stuff has been touched? But, Jason wanted to point out that he hadn't seen any of their people bring tablets yesterday, so why were several of them carrying one this morning? However, Colonel Morgan ignored Jason and kicked him in the butt. Get lost. Don't bother me, go do what you're supposed to do. They're going to be here for months. When will they stop? What the hell are you guys in such a hurry for? Jason, staggered from the kick, didn't dare say another word and quickly slipped away. Once the plane reached stable flight, Melinda switched the fighter jet to autopilot mode. Then she rubbed her temples. Having been away from field operations for a long time, she wasn't used to the ship's rocking motion. This meant she needed to concentrate extra hard to ensure all her actions were correct. "Did you remember everything?" Melinda asked Leni beside her without looking up, rubbing her slightly sore temples. "If you remembered, find a flat area on the iceberg before returning later and practice takeoffs and landings." Leni nodded in agreement, then, noticing Melinda wasn't looking at her, quickly agreed. "Okay, got it." Coulson, seeing that the matter was settled, could only sigh helplessly. It wasn't that he didn't trust Melinda's judgment, he just couldn't believe that Leni could fully learn to pilot the Quinjet after only 2 flights. No matter how intelligent the aircraft's operating system was, it was still an aircraft. This wasn't like learning to drive a car, where you could just learn the brakes, accelerator, clutch, gears, and steering wheel and start driving. This was an airplane. And it was their only means of long-distance transportation. If something went wrong, how would they find Captain America? Ignoring Coulson's conflicted expression, Leni took out a shining world globe from the void and handed it to Melinda. "Use this, it will relieve your fatigue." Melinda looked suspiciously at the crystal ball-like object in Leni's hand, about the size of a small steamed bun. "What is this?" Leni was taken aback by the question, then realized that Melinda, who had been in the archives department, hadn't seen her alchemical artifacts before. "This item has only been circulating within the field operations department so far, and Nick Fury has strictly forbidden agents from keeping such items privately." Melinda, who has long worked in the archives as a clerk, is understandably unaware of it. Leni's alchemical items require level 5 clearance to learn their origins and are only for use by field personnel, Coulson explained on Leni's behalf, reassuring Melinda. Upon hearing this, the other members of the research team also cast curious glances. They only knew that Leni was a special advisor to S.H.I.E.L.D, and they hadn't mentioned anything about alchemical potions during their introduction. Skye, for one, was still quite confused. Only Mester, upon seeing the world globe in Leni's hand, showed a fleeting, unusual look in her eyes. Chapter 138. Congratulations, you can say goodbye to those glasses now. Melinda took the crystal ball from Leni and silently recited the instructions to use it. The crystal ball immediately transformed into liquid and disappeared into Melinda's palm. Before anyone could react, a visible stream of light enveloped Melinda's entire body, instantly dispelling her fatigue. Melinda let out a comfortable hum, feeling not only the fatigue disappear but also a significant improvement in her spirits. It's truly an amazing thing. What's it called? After stretching her joints, Melinda felt no discomfort and asked with some surprise. A world sphere. It can remove all abnormal statuses, but it doesn't have a healing effect. Seeing that it was indeed effective, Leni took out several more world spheres from the void and distributed them to the others. "Everyone, take this time to adjust. Sea travel is different from other things, rough seas are inevitable. Sleep as much as you can, I'll handle the status issues." Although she said this, Leni knew it wasn't a long-term solution. The world peace can indeed remove abnormal states, but lack of sleep inevitably increases the burden on various organs. She can temporarily alleviate these conditions with a world peace or Raimi's assistance, but it's still not as comfortable as the body's natural regulation. Otherwise, endocrine disorders and other problems would be minor. "This is an alchemical item, how was it made?" Skye asked the 3 members of the science team, voicing their questions. "Is this thing even scientifically sound?" "Well, it's Stark Industries technology, a trade secret. This isn't provided to S.H.I.E.L.D for free, right, Coulson?" Leni didn't explain further. Not many people knew she could make this, and she didn't need to tell them. Besides, even if she told them the method, they couldn't replicate it. Even if they had the materials, only she could make it. Oh, right. Coulson thought, isn't this a freebie? And you should give me one too. I haven't slept well either, I want one too. Mester held the world piece in her hand, a faint smile playing on her lips. She silently recited use in her mind, and that familiar feeling gradually enveloped her body, causing her to let out a soft, comfortable moan. Startled by the sound, everyone turned their strange gazes to Mester. Seeing everyone staring at her, Mester realized what she had just made and immediately blushed. She quickly turned away to avoid everyone's gaze. Seeing this, everyone exchanged glances, and Simmons became even more hesitant to use it, looking at Fitz with some trepidation. Fitz didn't care much, these big shots weren't afraid of anything. He was more interested in the effect of the crystal ball itself. It's normal for this the first time you use it. It will help you eliminate some bad things from your body, and it won't happen again afterward, Leni explained for Mester, but it seemed to have the opposite effect. The girl's ears turned even redder. Simmons gritted his teeth, secretly clenching his jaw to control himself from making that embarrassing sound, and then silently recited use. Simmons groaned softly, relieved that it was still within acceptable limits, and breathed a sigh of relief, feeling the gradual ease spreading through his body. This is amazing. How did this happen? Is it dopamine or something? Somewhat, but not entirely. Maybe dopamine played a part, but I don't think it's that simple. Fitz stood up and stretched. The comfortable feeling like a good night's sleep was truly captivating. Sorry, this involves confidentiality, no comment. Leni shrugged. The more you say, the more mistakes you make. No explanation is the best explanation. The others didn't pay much attention, stretched their bodies a bit, and feeling refreshed, prepared to begin their work. But before they could turn around, Mester exclaimed in utter surprise, I can see clearly again? Her tone was filled with disbelief, but also with surprise and excitement. Everyone turned to look at her again, only to see Mester holding her thick, black-rimmed glasses in one hand and repeatedly pulling them closer to her face with the other. My nearsightedness is cured? Simmons, surprised, walked to Mester's side and cupped her face in his hands. Her pupils were deep and bright, there was no trace of nearsightedness. This is unbelievable. Mester used to be several thousand degrees nearsighted, the thick lenses clearly showed how severe her nearsightedness was. But now it's cured? Isn't this far better than any so-called nearsightedness surgery? Simple, fast, and according to Leni, there are no side effects. If this were taken to S.H.I.E.L.D's research institute, wouldn't those bookworms go crazy buying it? Leni, back in the passenger seat, glanced at it too, not finding it particularly surprising. After all, even blinding effects could be reversed. It wasn't unexpected that the world globe would work on nearsightedness. Congratulations, you can finally say goodbye to those thick glasses. After thinking for a moment, Leni reached into the air and retrieved a pair of her spare sunglasses. This is for you, a congratulatory gift for seeing the world clearly again. She asked Coulson, who was nearby, to pass it to her, and then turned back to operating the fighter jet. Melinda planned for her to control the plane at low altitude today, so Leni needed to keep her attention on the control stick at all times. Mester received the sunglasses from Coulson with great surprise, holding them in her hands as if they were a priceless treasure. Of course, she recognized them. She had seen Leni wear them before back at the bureau. The style was slightly different from the sunglasses Leni was currently wearing, and the color was more brownish. But most importantly, these were sunglasses Leni had worn. Something even more important than a personal autograph. Mester was so excited that she was almost incoherent, her voice trembling as she thanked him. This scene made Fitz and Simmons even more envious, wishing they could also get a pair of sunglasses. However, thinking that Leni probably didn't have many, she didn't dare to ask. But the envious look on her face was noticed by Leni, who secretly remembered it. She'd just give them a pair when she got back, it wasn't a big deal. Skye looked at the group with some oddness. She couldn't understand these academic types. It was just a pair of Leni's sunglasses, right? Why were they treating it like a treasure, like Kolb's sneakers? Was Leni really that famous? Come to think of it, she seemed to have a pair of sunglasses in her lounge too. She hadn't realized it was a gift at all. Skye assumed Leni had left it with her and thought she could just return it to Leni when she got back. Coulson, on the other hand, reached into his pocket and took out a pair of sunglasses of the same brand, putting them on. He smugly showed them off to the research group. The meaning of which was self-evident. Could it be? A surge of jealousy almost caused the two members of the research group to separate. Chapter 139. You actually prepared hamburgers and fried chicken? The Arctic is so vast, how long will it take us to search like this? Skye complained impatiently. Since she had nothing else to do and didn't understand much about S.H.I.E.L.D's high-tech equipment, Simmons assigned her to monitor the ground with her. Simmons operated the life detector, while Skye used an infrared thermal camera beside her to observe animals on the ground. During this time, they were lucky enough to spot a pair of polar bears, seemingly a female with her cubs. To avoid disturbing them, Leni didn't approach them in the aircraft. After confirming that the area didn't contain what they were looking for, they observed from a distance for a while and then left. You can't even sit still after just one day? Leni chuckled, maneuvering the fighter jet at a low speed, teasingly without turning her head. S.H.I.E.L.D pursed her lips without replying. Unlike the other academically trained researchers, she couldn't sit still for an entire day. In the vast Arctic, all she could see was white snow and ice. Staring at it for too long could easily cause snow blindness. Besides that, boredom was the main reason S.H.I.E.L.D couldn't sit still. This job was completely different from her usual hacking into other people's systems and firewalls. It was utterly devoid of challenge. All she had to do was watch the monitor and record any suspicious objects she saw during the search. If they didn't find anything concrete, they didn't even have to get off the plane. This was nothing like the work of a S.H.I.E.L.D agent she'd imagined. Shouldn't those so-called agents be like those in movies and TV shows, armed, blending into crowds, stealing secrets, doing dangerous, high-risk jobs? Why was she just sitting on a plane watching surveillance footage? Searching day and night. When will this ever end? Are we really going to stay in this godforsaken place for 3 months? S.H.I.E.L.D had already read the detailed plan for this mission, which clearly stated that it was expected to take 3 months to complete. But now, she couldn't even imagine staying for a week. Haste makes waste. Just stay put, Fitz said, marking their current location on the holographic map in red, indicating no findings. Alright, it's getting late. Let's find a safe place to land and rest. Melinda checked the time and the current search progress, estimating how long it would take to complete the search of the entire area. Leni, you operate the aircraft, and I'll guide you. Everyone agreed. It was indeed time for lunch. Although they could keep the aircraft on autopilot and eat in the air, since Melinda planned to teach Leni how to take off and land, saving some fuel was a good idea. So, they found a flat, thick ice surface and had Leni slowly lower the fighter jet. Take it slow, pay attention to the aircraft's balance. Don't just look at the altimeter. Pay attention to the level. Unlike when she was guiding Leni and operating the fighter jet, Melinda's voice became serious and louder after Leni began attempting to land the aircraft. If maintaining stable flight was a 5, then taking off and landing would be a 15 or even a 20. Leni didn't speak, concentrating entirely on operating the control stick. Since she was sitting in the right-hand passenger seat, she was operating the control stick with her right hand. In mirror mode, she needed to mirror and replicate the operations Melinda had performed earlier. With the system's support, memorizing all the operating procedures wasn't difficult for Leni. But actually piloting the ship was a different story. Finally, under everyone's anxious gaze, Melinda uttered the long-awaited words. Okay, system self-check. Congratulations everyone on successfully returning to the ground alive. Making a small joke, Melinda patted Leni's shoulder, indicating she could rest and that the rest was up to her. Leni breathed a sigh of relief and rubbed her wrists, which were slightly sore from tension. Not bad, not as difficult as I imagined. Getting up from the pilot's seat, Leni went to the rear cabin and retrieved a table and a microwave from the void. The conditions here didn't allow her to cook, so she could only use the microwave to simply reheat the food she had prepared, such as beef stew with potatoes and tomato and egg soup. Leni had specially borrowed the ship's kitchen to prepare this last night, since they had agreed beforehand that they wouldn't be back at noon. Therefore, Captain Morgan felt it was only natural to prepare some lunch, though he was a little worried about whether they could keep it warm. Leni explained that the plane had insulated boxes, so the captain could rest assured. Captain Morgan didn't doubt it, since the ingredients Leni used were brought by themselves, and he didn't mind if they just borrowed the kitchen. Besides, Leni had some cheeseburgers and fried chicken nuggets in her storage room. She had stocked up on both. She was just in case she got tired of eating other things here, so she kept them as a treat. Thanks to the lack of a sense of time in the void storage room, when she took the cheeseburgers and fried chicken nuggets out, they were still warm. You actually prepared burgers and fried chicken in your storage room? S.H.I.E.L.D's eyes widened. She had heard from Kelson that Leni liked cheeseburgers, but she hadn't expected Leni to be so obsessed with them, even bringing some with her to the Arctic. This is more convenient to eat, but I didn't ask what flavors you liked. I only prepared these 2. Leni took out several plates and served everyone a plate of beef stew with potatoes. She also added hamburgers and chicken nuggets, and a bowl of hot tomato and egg soup. Isn't this 100 times better than compressed biscuits and instant noodles? Sure enough, those seniors who said they would feel safe on field missions with Miss Leni weren't wrong. Fitz and Simmons nodded in deep agreement. With Leni around, any field mission, as long as there was no danger to their lives, was just a simple outing. She carried the supplies for an entire team all by herself, effortlessly and without taking up much space. Hot meals and clean drinking water were available wherever she went. This wasn't a mission, it was a pure Arctic vacation. You've redefined field missions, Leni. Melinda looked at the plates in front of her, somewhat amused and exasperated. She couldn't help but recall her own past experiences of exhausting herself on missions, not to mention whether she could even get a hot meal. If the location of their field missions was even a little out of the ordinary, whether they could even get a meal was another matter entirely. Melinda scooped a spoonful of beef and potato stew, and her eyes lit up. This familiar flavor, it was Chinese cooking. You can cook Chinese food? Leni nodded, smiling readily. I deliberately learned before, my skills are alright, right? Does it suit your taste? Melinda took another bite and gave it a pretty good review. Looks like we won't be eating self-heating food anymore. Chapter 140. She plans to burn the ice with fire? In the days that followed, the research team carried out the same routine every day. They would depart early from the icebreaker North Star, search for a morning, then land in a solid area or simply hover in the sky. After a midday rest, they would resume their afternoon search, returning to the North Star around 6 p.m. During this time, the Quinjet piloted by Leni and the others would periodically refuel and restore power on the North Star. However, Captain Morgan and the crew were unaware of the Quinjet's actual range, assuming it was some kind of advanced technology developed by S.H.I.E.L.D. In reality, most of the time, their refueling was done outside. With Leni's void warehouse, an unlimited number of fuel tanks could be stacked, taking up only one slot on the warehouse. She could carry as much as she wanted. If it weren't for the sheer absurdity of not refueling at all, Leni and her team wouldn't even need to use the North Star's fuel. Thanks to Leni, the research team members quickly adapted to the ship's rocking motion. And now they could generally sleep at night, although they were sometimes awakened by the ship's rocking. But as long as the Polaris's speed wasn't too high and the ice wasn't too solid, their rest wouldn't be a problem. They could just use another, shining world globe, the next morning. Beep. Wait a minute. I think I found something new. Fitz was operating the large metal detector beneath the fighter jet as usual, wondering if he should have Sky take over for him so he could rest a bit. However, the sudden beep startled him, and he realized the detector had reacted. For over 10 days, it hadn't made a sound. If he didn't know they were in the Arctic, Fitz would have almost thought it was broken. Everyone was taken aback. Mester leaned over and zoomed in on the control panel, overlaying it onto the radar and sonar image. As the three panels overlapped, Mester showed a complex expression of both joy and disappointment. This shouldn't be the plane that gentleman was piloting, but I suspect it's another piece of wreckage from that plane. Carlson stroked his chin, examining the size and shape of the metal object detected by the detector on the holographic image. What do you think this is? Everyone shook their heads. Judging by appearance alone wouldn't yield any useful information. They had to see it for themselves. Their gazes turned to Leni in the co-pilot's seat. I'll get out. Carlson, get the rope ready. Melinda, lower the altitude a bit more. Leni said, rising from the co-pilot's seat. The ice cover in this area wasn't solid, most of it was floating ice, so they couldn't land directly on it. Therefore, they had to lower the plane as much as possible, with Leni wearing a safety leash to descend onto the ice for the retrieval operation. Everyone put on their down jackets and helped Leni put on her protective gear and ropes. Melinda then opened the rear hatch of the fighter jet. The cold air rushed into the cabin, causing everyone to shiver. Melinda controlled the plane to descend slowly to a height of only 2 or 3 meters above the ice, then gestured behind her to indicate they could begin. Leni nodded, walked to the edge of the hatch, and gave everyone a thumbs up. They then reached the edge of the hatch and slid down the safety rope hanging above it. Once their feet touched the ice, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The ice condition seemed relatively optimistic. She tugged at the safety rope, signaling Carlson to lower it further so she could approach the target. Activating the radar system, Leni focused her attention on the radar data and slowly approached the metal object. The metal fragment was frozen beneath the ice, which Leni estimated to be about a meter deep. She retrieved a chainsaw from the void and started it, preparing to cut off the ice sheet. However, after cutting a square in the ice, she realized she couldn't fit the whole thing into the warehouse. Limited by the length of the chainsaw's blade, Leni couldn't remove the entire block of ice. She didn't have any hose or picks with her, so she was at a loss for what to do. Retracting the chainsaw into the void, Leni rubbed her chin, thinking carefully. Finally, she decided on a more direct method, heating it with fire. Removing the safety harness from her waist, Leanne spoke to Melinda through the communicator. "Melinda, raise the fighter jet a bit. The ice here is very solid, don't worry about me. I'll have to use some unconventional methods to dig this thing out." Melinda glanced at Callison and the others, and after receiving Callison's approval, she raised the fighter jet and flew away. Once she was sure the fighter jet was at a safe distance, Leanne stepped back slightly, a flash of light passing between her hands. An exaggeratedly designed flamethrower appeared in her arms. The red gas canister of a rugby ball paired with a large metal nozzle immediately attracted everyone's attention. "What's that? A flamethrower? Is she planning to melt the ice?" Simmons was incredulous. Leanne actually had such a deadly contraption hidden on her. Fitz and Skye were equally surprised, especially Skye, who finally remembered what kind of person Leanne really was. Her usual playful antics had almost made her forget that Leni was a superhuman with eyes that glowed with gold. Only Mester, upon seeing the massive weapon in Leni's hands, finally showed a look of realization. Boom! As Leni pulled the trigger of the focused flamethrower, a thin, scorching flame shot out. And as the flame's temperature continued to intensify, the outer part of the flame even began to turn a terrifying blue. The temperature of over 1,000 degrees instantly melted the ice surface along the path of the flame, skipping the step of melting into liquid water, directly vaporizing it into water vapor. Even the water vapor in the middle didn't have time to rise before it was completely evaporated by the flame. This was much faster than using a chainsaw or a pickaxe, baking a large crater in the ice surface in minutes. Receiving feedback from the radar system, the ice layer on the surface of the metal object had been mostly melted. Leni then put the flamethrower back into the armory, glanced at her masterpiece not far away, and nodded in satisfaction. "You're not going to use this thing against humans, are you?" Callison said with a hint of melancholy over the communicator. "If this weapon were actually used on the battlefield, it would likely be a scene of hell. Just think of the soldiers who died from napalm bombs in World War II. Being burned alive by such intense heat would be an incredibly gruesome sight. Don't worry, I don't really like this thing. It was just a coincidence this time." Leni gave a thumbs up towards the fighter jet, then waited a moment. Once she was sure the ice temperature had dropped to normal level, she slowly approached the metal object again. Chapter 141 What kind of best friends are these? Leni stepped into the fan-shaped ice pit formed by the focused flamethrower. The temperature was gradually returning to normal, and upon closer inspection, she noticed a small, continuously freezing pool in its center. This was clearly due to the residual heat from the air melting the ice after the flames had died down. Seeing this, Leni was puzzled. How could she get this large piece of metal debris out? Would continuing to heat it melt it? After a moment's hesitation, Leni decided to check her void storage to see if she could find suitable tools. She remembered she had a hammer and an entrenching tool. Fortunately, she hadn't cleared those out before, so an entrenching tool would be sufficient. Leni took out the entrenching tool and scooped out the still frozen water, one scoop at a time, from the ice pit. Then, using the sharp edge of the entrenching tool, she broke through the ice layer on the metal debris until she could touch it. Relieved, Leni casually tossed the entrenching tool back into the void. Then, she placed her right hand on the metal wreckage, and with a thought, faint ripples spread from her palm outwards. The ice surface was a single unit, and Leni's void storage lacked cutting capabilities, so it was impossible to directly insert the metal wreckage along with the ice surface. However, the metal wreckage itself was different. As long as Leni could touch the wreckage, the system would treat it as an independent object. Leni only needed to wait for the system to analyze and deconstruct it, and then quietly wait for the ripples to envelop the entire wreckage. No mining equipment or crane was needed, she could just sit there and wait. Once the system's progress bar finished, the wreckage beneath Leni's feet suddenly disappeared, recovery successful. However, before Leni could even rejoice, the 1-meter square ice surface beneath her feet shattered abruptly due to the loss of the wreckage's support. Before she could even stand up, Leni, who hadn't had time to react, fell directly into the ice pit she had dug herself. What happened? Leni. Are you alright? Callison, who had been watching Leni closely, was startled and quickly grabbed the communicator to call out to her. He thought there was a crack in the ice beneath, and Leni had slipped and fallen in. Melinda, who had also been watching the situation closely, saw Leni, who had just been squatting on the ground doing something, suddenly disappear. She quickly maneuvered the aircraft to slowly approach the ice pit. I'm fine, just a little embarrassed. Callison, Throw down the rope and pull me up. Leni slowly stood up from the ice pit, but at 172 centimeters tall, only her head could barely stick out. It would be rather unseemly for her to climb up like that, so Leni simply waved to the Quinjet approaching overhead. Her appearance reminds me of a certain popular meme. Sky, relieved to see that Leni was alright, couldn't help but feel that Leni's current state was exactly like a popular animated emoticon online. Indeed, but I've already recorded what you just said, and I'll tell Miss Leni on it later. Mester adjusted her sunglasses, a cruel smile playing on her lips. After her eyesight recovered, she couldn't shake her habit of adjusting her glasses anytime soon, so she simply kept wearing sunglasses. Seriously? You're going to tattle on this? Sky sighed helplessly. What kind of best friend is this? Melinda switched the Quinjet to autopilot mode, keeping it cruising in the air, and then turned to look at the cockpit. I'll put this thing on the tray, just a moment. Leni, who had already returned to the fighter jet, gestured for the others not to rush, and casually pulled a wooden tray from the void and placed it on the cockpit floor. Only then did she take the metal part, which was now difficult to identify with the naked eye, out of the void and place it on the tray. This thing had been frozen for at least 60 years, and its surface was covered with burn marks, with many parts melted and deformed. Leni couldn't believe it could be apart from that part of the aircraft. Fitz took out a pre-prepared scanner, scanned the entire component, and then uploaded the data to the operable display screen. Can it be restored? Simmons looked at Fitz expectantly. Fitz was reliable in this regard. It should be fine, I'll try. While he said it should be, Fitz was actually quite confident. Although S.H.I.E.L.D's database didn't have detailed data about that fighter jet, this was clearly no problem for Fitz. His fingers flew across the control panel, zooming in, zooming out, repairing, and replacing. Leni felt that Fitz wasn't restoring this metal part, but rather retouching an image, much like the process of those goddesses using photo editing apps in her past life. After about 5 minutes, Fitz exhaled and showed everyone his completed restoration. That's about it. I'm not entirely sure which part of the plane it's from, but the material and manufacturing process are basically the same as the wreckage the Russians provided. Sky unconsciously reached out and touched the metal wreckage. So, at least this thing proves that our current search direction is roughly correct, right? Fitz nodded, then shook his head. Theoretically, yes, but we can't guarantee whether that gentleman tried to control the plane to turn or to make an emergency landing at the last moment. Leni agreed, remembering that Captain America could fly, and in the movie, his thought was to make an emergency landing until the very last moment. Fitz is right, but this thing at least proves that our efforts over this period of time haven't been in vain. Mester pulled up the original estimated flight path and marked the location of the new wreckage on the satellite image. To everyone's surprise, although the wreckage deviated slightly from the originally predicted flight path, it was still roughly in the correct direction. This discovery greatly encouraged everyone, at least proving that their tedious 10 days of life had not been in vain. In that case, let's continue our search along this flight path. With luck, we might find the plane in a couple of days. Carlson's eyes gleamed with hope. He felt that with Leni around, they might actually find that man this time. Previously, the investigation team had been searching southwards in a fan-shaped pattern around the location where the first piece of wreckage was found. However, now that they had found another piece of metal wreckage of the same material, they decided to change their search method to heading directly south along the flight path. This way, they might be able to find Captain America near the flight path. Everyone agreed, the previous carpet search was far too tedious. Now, with a clear direction, searching directly along the flight path was indeed the right choice. But they hadn't expected that they would be so naive. Chapter 2 will be a little late. Orange had to go out for a while. Sorry everyone. Chapter 142. That gentleman will remember your contribution. The fighter jet slowly landed on the aft deck of the Polaris, and Carlson and his team used a forklift to carry the wreckage into the ship's hold. Is this the wreckage from that plane? Captain Morgan reached out and touched the metal fragment. The cold texture made his fingertips tremble involuntarily. Carlson didn't answer, but instead glanced at the numerous crew members present. The investigation team's mission to find Captain America's fighter jet was classified, something Captain Morgan knew. But the other crew members didn't know. They only knew that Carlson and his team had come to the Arctic to search for S.H.I.E.L.D's missing fighter jet and pilot. What kind of plane it was, who the pilot was, Carlson and his team hadn't said, and none of them had asked. However, Curiosity was still inevitable. Everyone wanted to see what kind of thing it was that warranted such a large-scale, exhaustive search of the Arctic by S.H.I.E.L.D. Hey, what are you all looking at? Don't you have any work to do? Do you want me to start yelling? Get out, get out. Captain Morgan roared. Seeing their captain speak, the numerous crew members who had been watching immediately scattered like birds and beasts, going back to what they were doing. Captain, could you please provide us with a storage room? We'll keep this on your ship temporarily. Knowing Kelson was hesitant to ask, Leni spoke up first. To show our gratitude, we'll have the Bureau continue to provide you and your crew with better and more abundant supplies and medicines. Hearing this, Captain Morgan immediately beamed and laughed heartily. What are you saying? Kelson and I are old friends. What's this trouble? It's just a storage room. The captain waved his hand, beckoning Jason, a crew member who was about to slip away when things got tense. It's nothing, I'll have someone arrange it right away. Jason, go prepare a storage room for the guests. Be quick. Hurry up. Jason, whose name was called, paused in his tracks, inwardly cursing the captain for always calling him whenever there was trouble. He was clearly ready to slip away, but why couldn't he escape? Yes, my dear Captain, Jason replied sarcastically, and before Captain Morgan could kick him, Jason quickly slipped away. Fortunately, the storage room wasn't the girls' lounge, and it didn't require any special conditions, just enough to hold the metal wreckage. This was obviously no problem for Jason. He quickly tidied up a storage room they usually used to store odds and ends, and the size was just right. Fitz used a forklift to place the wreckage, secured it to ensure it wouldn't move around with the ship's movements, then closed the storage room door and left. Watching Fitz's departing figure, Jason, who had been observing the scene from the sidelines, turned his gaze back to the door of the storeroom. Captain's cabin, Captain, they haven't touched the piece of wreckage since they put it in there. Jason whispered to his captain. Captain Morgan frowned, putting down the logbook he was still writing in. So, they've confirmed that it's wreckage from that plane? Jason nodded. I think so. In that case, we don't have much time left. Captain Morgan looked at the flight path displayed on the computer, silently determining a rough location in his mind. So, should we? Glancing at Jason, Captain Morgan knew what the kid was thinking. No rush? We don't need to handle this kind of menial work, otherwise I wouldn't be able to explain it to the authorities. Then what do you mean? The captain stroked his beard, pondering for a moment. Let the Russians get involved too. Jason's eyes lit up at the suggestion. It was a good idea. They could use the trouble to their advantage and reap the benefits. However, Jason then remembered something and whispered, Captain, shouldn't you talk to that gentleman about this? Morgan's expression froze. He realized he hadn't informed the gentleman yet and quickly waved Jason out. He then took an encrypted satellite phone from the drawer, confirmed the hatch was closed and the signal was working, and dialed a number. A mechanical voice came from the other end, followed by a somewhat electronic male voice. Please confirm your identity. Art F. Morgan. Please wait. After a while, there was no response. Most people might think they dialed the wrong number, but Captain Morgan knew this was simply the other party verifying his identity. Click. Another mechanical sound, and the call was disconnected. However, the captain wasn't worried and continued to hold the phone. Sure enough, less than the time it takes to smoke a cigarette, the satellite phone rang. What is it? A somewhat aged voice came from the other end as soon as he answered. Hello, Doctor. It's like this. Morgan reported to the other party about the metal debris the S.H.I.E.L.D. investigation team had found, hoping they could contact Russia to send someone to stop them. However, after listening to Morgan's explanation, the other party didn't immediately give him a reply. You said there's a girl in the investigation team named Leni? Leni Testarossa Stark? Ah, yes, I think that's the name. Morgan was a little confused. What was wrong with that woman? Okay, I understand. Do as you say. Keep an eye on these people's movements and report to me immediately if anything happens. That gentleman will remember your contribution. With that, the elderly man called doctor hung up. Leni Testarossa, Morgan repeated the name, not thinking there was anything wrong with it. Wasn't that girl just a security officer? Or perhaps he hadn't been back to the agency for the past 2 years, and something had happened there that he didn't know about? It seemed he needed to find out about this Leni. Morgan hesitated for a moment, then pulled out a cell phone from his pocket and dialed the number of another old friend he knew at S.H.I.E.L.D. at Elf Morgan. Aren't you? If Leni were here, she would definitely recognize the person on the other end of the line. It's me. I'm in the Arctic right now. I'm calling to ask if you know a woman named Leni Testarossa Stark? Hearing the name, the other person was also taken aback, a strange expression appearing on their face. Yes, I know her. How do you know her? Captain Morgan frowned, a bad feeling rising in his heart. She's on my ship right now. I'd like to know what she does. The person on the other end was silent for a moment before replying, a new recruit in the department, fairly well known, good marksman, just a bit eccentric. What's wrong? Morgan narrowed his eyes. This introduction seemed a little perfunctory, he felt something was amiss. You're not lying to me, are you? The person on the other end chuckled, his tone laced with sarcasm. Why would I lie to you? She's just a somewhat famous rookie agent. What, is she hindering your operations? Captain Morgan's tone faltered, and he replied awkwardly, no, it's just a little strange. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 143, the 11th day since Leni left, missing her. S.H.I.E.L.D. hung up the phone, a mocking expression on his face, and scoffed. Just a pawn, daring to talk to me like that. Just moments before, S.H.I.E.L.D. had finished paying the bill at the Chinese restaurant recommended by Leni and was leaving when he suddenly received an encrypted message. After decrypting it, the translated message read, "Do not reveal any Stark's identity to F. Morgan." S.H.I.E.L.D. was somewhat surprised. This sentence revealed far too much information, leaving him momentarily bewildered. Wasn't F. Morgan sent by his superiors to search for that person's whereabouts? He was supposedly active in the Arctic Circle for the past 2 years. How could he be involved with that girl Leni? Or was Callson's current field mission to the Arctic? This meant. Before S.H.I.E.L.D. could grasp the key points, his phone rang. He pulled it out and saw it was F. Morgan. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s pupils constricted slightly, further solidifying his suspicions, leading to the earlier conversation. Through a brief conversation, S.H.I.E.L.D. had a pretty good idea of what was going on. The only thing that could make Callson so invested, and require him to bring Leni along on a mission to the Arctic, was probably S.H.I.E.L.D's Yeti search for Captain America. However, S.H.I.E.L.D. didn't think this restarted Yeti project would succeed. He estimated the outcome would be the same as last year, a fruitless endeavor. Leni would likely only provide some convenience. She didn't have X-ray vision to see the plane through the vast ocean. Finding Captain America in the Arctic Ocean with just their plane was like finding a needle in a haystack. And even if they found the jet, what difference would it make? In the end, it would just fall into Hydra's hands. What belongs to Hydra will eventually belong to Hydra. As for F. Morgan? Who cares? What does his life or death have to do with us? Does he think he's Hydra just because he says so? A pawn is just a pawn, it can never escape the chessboard. Thinking of this, a mocking smile returned to S.H.I.E.L.D's face, and he put his phone away. Let's go back to the station, more overtime today. I'm starting to miss Renee. Without her free alchemical potions, overtime is just too unbearable. He stretched and sighed. It's been 11 days since Renee left. I miss her. Colonel F. Morgan's face darkened as he listened to the busy tone on the other end of the phone. He could hear the sarcasm in S.H.I.E.L.D's voice, and he could even imagine the guy's mocking expression. So what if he's a favorite of that man? What's so great about him? They were from the same cohort, so why can he get along with both Nick Fury and that man? Is it because I joined Hydra later than S.H.I.E.L.D.? Colonel Morgan was furious, his jealousy and resentment finding nowhere to vent, so he could only vent his anger on the sandbags in the captain's cabin. He was equally talented, equally skilled in both academics and martial arts, so why could S.H.I.E.L.D. act so arrogantly in the department, while he had to stay in this godforsaken Arctic Circle for years? What right did he have? F. Morgan's resentment deepened, and his dissatisfaction with Hydra grew increasingly apparent. Captain? Jason's puzzled voice came from outside the door. Nothing. I'm just practicing my punches, you go and rest. With a sigh of relief, Captain Morgan straightened the sandbag and called out to the door. Jason didn't think much of it. He'd been with the captain for a while and knew what the sandbags in his training room were for. Damn S.H.I.E.L.D., One day I'll make you pay. Miss Leni, you mean that crew member named Jason? Simmons, somewhat frightened, instinctively reached out and hugged Sky beside her. I was just saying, but anyway, just be careful of that guy. I have a feeling there's something off about the way he looks at us. Leni sat cross-legged on the bed, holding a P-30L gun part in one hand and a cleaning cloth in the other, maintaining the gun. Sky, watching Leni's movements, also imitated her, carefully cleaning her Glock 19. Haven't seen a woman in over half a year, that's normal, right? Having survived so long in the underworld unscathed, Sky had some skills. She didn't think Jason's gaze was strange, the other crew members were in similar situations. That guy is different. There's more than just lust in his eyes. Melinda held a thick French book in her arms. Judging from the speed and thickness of her pages, she'd been reading it for a while. I think so too, especially the way he looked at me today. It made me very uncomfortable. Sitting on the upper bunk, Meister put away the sunglasses Leni had given her, a cold glint in her eyes. See, it's obvious I'm not the only one who thinks something's off about him. Leni shrugged, then looked at Simmons, who was standing close to Sky, with a puzzled expression. Hasn't your research team had any shooting training? Why did Fitz say no when I asked him if he could use a gun? Simmons shook his head and explained, we don't normally have that kind of training. Only researchers who frequently work in the field are required to have shooting training. As he spoke, Simmons sighed. Logically, Fitz and I should have been tested and trained first, but Agent Callison was in a hurry and gave us the green light. I see, Leni nodded in understanding. In that case, you and Sky will stay with Fitz from now on. Make sure you have someone with you and don't act alone. Leni reloaded the P-30L, chambered around, and checked the chamber. I have a feeling that this icebreaker isn't as simple as it seems. Melinda paused in her book flipping, looked up at Leni, her face expressionless. Leni, you know who Captain R.F. Morgan is. If this isn't handled properly, you'll likely be punished when you get back. However, Leni showed no fear. Hell, it's alright. That bald guy can't do anything to me. Hearing this nickname, the women were taken aback and exchanged glances. You're not talking about Commissioner Fury, are you? Melinda clearly knew what bald had meant, her expression subtly changing. Thinking about it, Nick Fury did indeed resemble him. Shaking her head, banishing the somewhat impolite thought, Melinda forced herself to pretend she hadn't heard. Who else could it be but that one-eyed bald guy? Leni was nonchalant. He hadn't done anything to her face, so he was even less afraid of being talked about behind her back. The women could only silently give her a thumbs up. It has to be you. Chapter 144 Polaris calls Aegis 13. A week later, Captain R.F. Morgan frowned, watching the Quinjet disappear into the distance. Although so many days had passed, he hadn't heard any further news from Callison and his crew about the aircraft. But Captain Morgan was deeply worried that they weren't telling him the truth. If it weren't for the tracking devices he'd installed showing the plane was still patrolling and searching, Captain Morgan would probably have already decided to have Callison and his men locked up. Captain, I have a feeling they've been keeping an eye on us lately? Jason's expression was unnatural. He felt targeted. Lately, no matter who he tried to talk to, the women all seemed indifferent to him. He hadn't done anything. Although he did intend to do something, he hadn't done it yet, so why had his favorability rating plummeted? Captain Morgan narrowed his eyes, took out a cigarette from his pocket, lit it, and then offered one to Jason. You better watch your step these days, kid. That Leni isn't simple. I think she's figured you out, so she's been keeping a close eye on you. Jason took the cigarette, a glint of ruthlessness flashing in his eyes. Huh? Really? I've been behaving myself. Morgan glanced at the guy, a fleeting sneer in his eyes. Anyway, don't cause me any trouble. I know your tricks all too well. Don't ruin my plans, or I'll make you regret it. Captain Morgan scolded the sleazy guy, clearly displeased. How could Hydra let someone like this join them? If it weren't for the fact that this guy was hardworking and knew how to get things done, he would have thrown him into the North Atlantic to feed the fish long ago. He's a womanizer, and he's a womanizer too. Now he's wanted by the authorities. If this guy messes up important matters, he'll be the first to kill him. Yes, you're right. I'm not trying to cause trouble. I definitely won't cause you any trouble. Jason lowered his head and slowly backed away, slipping away while the captain wasn't looking at him as he smoked. Ah, so much for the promise of finding it? Sky stood behind Leni, gazing at the vast, boundless sea in the distance, and said somewhat dejectedly, "Maybe it's really like Fitz said before, that Mr. Rogers changed course when the plane made the emergency landing?" Simmons turned to Fitz beside him, hoping he could say something. However, Fitz could only shrug helplessly, indicating that he was powerless to help. "Then what should we do? Go back and continue searching in the same way as before?" S.H.I.E.L.D turned to Coulson, wanting to hear the opinion of this Captain America fan. Coulson stroked his chin, pondered for a moment, and then shifted his gaze to the holographic map. Based on their original predictions, Coulson thought the possibility of finding Captain America should be relatively high. However, it was now clear that Captain America had changed the plane's course in the final stage. "Perhaps we should search further east," Coulson said, pointing to the holographic map that had divided the area they had searched into two parts, specifically a section of the glacier plate. The reason for continuing east was that the piece of metal debris they had found earlier was located slightly east of their estimated flight path. If Captain America hadn't made any unnecessary maneuvers, the fighter jet's final landing route should also have been slightly east. Now that they hadn't found any trace of the fighter jet along the straight line, the next step was to continue searching eastward. "Let's continue then. We'll search back, and if necessary, do another thorough search," Leni said, unconcerned. They had been out for over half a month and had adapted to their current work environment. Even S.H.I.E.L.D, who had previously complained of being bored, had started focusing on her cybersecurity research. In her words, instead of staring at monitors, she'd rather spend her time studying S.H.I.E.L.D's firewall. She could hone her skills with it and also find vulnerabilities in S.H.I.E.L.D's firewall. Of course, her real thought was to see if she could find anything interesting in S.H.I.E.L.D's database. However, every time she tried to do so, Coulson would discover her and force her to stop. S.H.I.E.L.D wondered if Coulson had eyes in the back of his head, while he always managed to detect her actions. Meanwhile, Simmons and Maester acted as if it were none of their business. When it came to S.H.I.E.L.D, the two of them always managed to team up and betray her. Just as they were about to search back east along their original flight path, Melinda's radio crackled with a call. "Polaris calling S.H.I.E.L.D. 13. Repeat, Polaris calling S.H.I.E.L.D. 13. Melinda was startled. Why would Polaris suddenly contact them, and on an encrypted channel no less? Aegis 13 received. "Polaris, please speak." Aegis 13, "We've received a request for assistance from Canada. A crew member on their icebreaker, the Louis St. Laurent, has had both arms severed by mechanical damage and urgently needs surgery." Everyone was startled and turned to Leni in unison. "Don't rush, let's hear what they have to say." Leni gestured for Melinda to reply. She wasn't planning to make a decision right now. "What do they need us to do?" Captain Morgan spoke quickly and clearly on the other end of the communicator. "Their ship doesn't have the necessary surgical facilities. They need to get the injured crew member to the nearest Canadian hospital, but their helicopter is broken and hasn't been repaired yet, so they have to ask us for help." Captain Morgan's tone revealed a hint of helplessness. He couldn't do anything about it. "But as you know, we're not carrying a helicopter on this voyage, and there are no other ships in the surrounding waters, so we can only ask for your opinion." Melinda didn't immediately reply to Captain Morgan but turned to look at Coulson. Everyone's attention also focused on him. After all, Coulson was in charge of this mission. The Quinjet is a classified aircraft developed by S.H.I.E.L.D, and if it were simply exposed to the side of other countries. Coulson paused for a moment, then nodded, signaling Melinda to reply to Captain Morgan that they were willing to go. "Lives are at stake. I know the captain of that ship, I can help." Leni looked at the man with a receding hairline, seeing no hesitation in his eyes. Sensing the meaning in Leni's eyes, Coulson gave her a reassuring look. "The agency will handle this. There's also a S.H.I.E.L.D branch in Canada, they won't say anything against us." Receiving a positive reply, Captain Morgan was clearly relieved. He had been genuinely worried that Coulson wouldn't agree, given the mission and S.H.I.E.L.D's high-tech aircraft. If Coulson refused, he wouldn't know what to say. Chapter 145 will talk about gratitude later. Saving lives is the priority. The HMCS Louis St. Laurent, Canada's largest icebreaker in service, as of 2011, was commissioned in 1969. It is 119 meters long, has a draft of 9.8 meters, and a displacement of 14,500 tons. This behemoth was originally supposed to be equipped with 2 helicopters, but for some unknown reason, the Lewis St. Laurent only carried one on this voyage. Then, unfortunately, the helicopter's rotor shaft failed, and the injured crew member was injured while repairing the rotor shaft when his arms were severed by a hydraulic system. The ship's doctor arrived immediately upon being notified and provided immediate first aid and treatment. Fortunately, the crew member is not in life-threatening condition but needs to be transported to hospital for surgery within 12 hours. An hour has passed since the incident, and Canada has tried all available frequencies to request assistance. However, due to the intense rivalry and distrust among several Arctic nations this year, it has been a long time before any country has agreed to send a helicopter. Even the nearest Arctic research team would need several hours to complete the transport mission. Given the severity of the injuries, the shorter the medical time, the better. Therefore, Captain Morgan contacted Carlson, hoping that Carlson and his team's Aegis-equipped Quinjet 13 could go to the Lewis St. Laurent to provide assistance. Of course, Captain Morgan knew his request was somewhat unreasonable. After all, the research team was on a classified mission, and S.H.I.E.L.D's high-tech aircraft shouldn't be easily exposed to other countries. However, Carlson resolutely accepted, and his reasoning was simple: S.H.I.E.L.D wouldn't abandon this situation. Since it's decided, let's go. Melinda pulled the control stick, the fighter jet suddenly climbed, and then rapidly flew towards the coordinates of the Lewis St. Laurent icebreaker provided by Captain Morgan. Leni, sitting in the co-pilot's seat, looked through the glass at the behemoth below. This behemoth was clearly a bit clumsy than the Polaris. After all, with its 14,500-ton displacement, this thing is a behemoth compared to the 11,000-ton Polaris. Lewis St. Laurent, this is Aegis 13. We will be landing in 1 minute. Please prepare to transport the injured to hospital with surgical capabilities within 2 hours. Repeat. Captain Morgan had already communicated with a Lewis St. Laurent and promised a high-tech fighter jet to provide support. Therefore, the Lewis St. Laurent wasn't surprised by the arrival of the Quinjet, only somewhat surprised by their speed. Lewis St. Laurent received, "Thank you for your generous rescue. I express my gratitude on behalf of the injured crew member and his family." A slightly aged voice came from the other end of the communicator, sounding at least 60 years old. Confirming the captain was an old acquaintance, Carlson connected the communication. "Old John, we can talk about thanks later. Have your men get ready, time is of the essence." The person on the other end of the line, hearing Carlson's voice, was slightly taken aback, momentarily forgetting who this person had suddenly intruded upon, and could only respond with a slightly awkward tone. "All right, saving lives is the priority." This time, Melinda had Leni piloting the Quinjet, while she controlled it entirely herself. Surrounded by the crew of the Lewis St. Laurent, the uniquely designed Quinjet gradually descended, landing slowly on the helicopter deck at the stern with its back to them. Melinda reduced the turbojet engine at the tail of the Quinjet to its lowest power, then adjusted the output power of the 2 turbine engines on the wings until the aircraft landed steadily. And when it was still about 10 meters from the ground, Melinda had already opened the tail hatch. The crew on deck understood. Seeing that the door was already open, they pushed the hospital bed into the cabin without a word. Without further ado, Carlson confirmed her identity and waved for Melinda to take off. "Without further ado, let's get going." The injured man, named Perez, was a maintenance worker on the Lewis St. Laurent, responsible for repairing helicopters and other large equipment on board. 3 people accompanied him onto the aircraft, the ship's doctor and 2 crew members. The doctor, a man in his mid-20s named Hardman, was the youngest of the Lewis St. Laurent's doctors. He was carefully holding the injured man's 2 arms in his arms. One of the crew members, a middle-aged man of similar age to Perez, was named Bennett. It was said that Perez had tried to save him, which resulted in his arms being severed by the hydraulic system. Therefore, Bennett was extremely remorseful and self-reproachful, constantly apologizing and muttering that he was responsible for Perez's death. The last crew member, a man in his 30s named Kaplan, had been sent by Captain John of the Lewis St. Laurent to monitor Carlson and the others, and to protect Perez. Before the truth of the matter is clarified, Perez and Bennett, who were involved, will be detained by the authorities upon their return to Canada. Therefore, Old John needs Kaplan to keep an eye on Bennett until he is taken away or released by the Canadian police. Of course, how much of this is true, and whether the truth is as they say, is unknown to Leni and the others. They are not police officers, and this operation is merely a temporary humanitarian rescue, Leni and the others do not want to get involved in these Canadian affairs. After picking up the injured and flying to Canada to transport them to the nearest hospital for surgery, their mission will be complete. There is no need to complicate things further. The fewer people who know about the Quinjet, the better. This way, Coulson can let his S.H.I.E.L.D. colleagues in Canada handle the follow-up. At the very least, it should not be exposed to the public eye. Therefore, everyone on the plane remains silent, refraining from discussing topics unrelated to the incident. Coulson even wore sunglasses, and before the trip, Leni had temporarily hung a black curtain in the cabin to separate the fighter jet into the cockpit and cargo hold. To ensure the Quinjet's internal equipment remained hidden from the Canadians, everyone except Leni remained seated quietly in the cockpit. Mester, originally seated closest to the cargo hold, was temporarily moved to the co-pilot position by Leni, to prevent her from being exposed when the curtain was lifted. She and Coulson were responsible for docking in the cargo hold and ensuring the safety of the entire investigation team. Chapter 146. You still want to save him? He deserves to die. Leni reached out and lifted the black curtain, stepping from the cockpit into the cargo hold, and gestured to Coulson. Coulson nodded imperceptibly in response. Noticing the man's arms, which were heavily bandaged and noticeably shorter, Leni turned to the doctor named Hardman. How is he? Hardman, cradling two similarly bandaged arms, sighed. Before we came, we gave him adrenaline and painkillers. He's stable now, but still unconscious. Leni nodded, offering a few words of reassurance. We'll get you to the nearest Canadian hospital within 2 hours. Don't worry, he'll be fine. Taking a glucose injection from the medical kit, Hudson planned to give Perez some sugar and fluids. A 2-hour flight wasn't long, but it wasn't short either. Some preparation was necessary. Unlike the other two, Kaplan, sitting at the rear of the cockpit, didn't show the same concern for Perez. Instead, he frequently glanced at the high-tech fighter jet out of the corner of his eye, and occasionally at Leni and Coulson. Most of his gaze was fixed on Leni, which puzzled her, as her radar system was constantly on. Why was this guy looking at her so much? Both she and Coulson were wearing sunglasses, so Leni didn't think Kaplan recognized her. She rarely appeared outside of Stark Industries, except for the Stark Expo. Kaplan clearly knew this wasn't the time, so he didn't say anything, simply observing the group. During the journey, aside from Coulson occasionally exchanging a few words with Hardman to check on Perez's condition, the rest of the time they listened to Bennett's mutterings. The group didn't find it annoying. Spending years in the Arctic, a godforsaken place, would inevitably lead to some minor health issues. The journey was uneventful. When Melinda arrived in Canada in her fighter jet, the investigation team finally saw the sunset, a welcome sight after a long absence. For the past 2 weeks, they had grown accustomed to the sun always high in the sky, and the sudden darkness was still somewhat unsettling. Under the cover of night, Melinda slowly landed the Quinjet on the rooftop helipad of the hospital. A large crowd had already gathered on the rooftop, including Canadian police and hospital staff. They would ensure that upon receiving the patient, the injured were immediately transported to the operating room, and that the impact of the incident was minimized. Watching the group push the hospital bed off the plane, Leni and Coulson both breathed a sigh of relief. Just as they were about to have Melinda raise the hatch and begin their return journey, something unexpected happened. Bennett, who had been dutifully helping the medical staff push the bed just moments before, suddenly reached under the unconscious Perez on the bed and pulled a P226 pistol. Before anyone could react, Bennett grabbed the terrified nurse beside him and took her hostage. Don't move. If you move, I'll kill her. Bennett's eyes were bloodshot, and large beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. He had clearly been agonizing over this for a long time. Several Canadian police officers were clearly unprepared for this situation, and they instinctively pointed their guns at Bennett. You. Get away from me. Or I'll kill her. Bennett dragged the trembling nurse towards the edge of the building, waving his pistol at the police. Don't be agitated. We won't come any closer. Can you let the doctors go and save her first? A younger-looking officer tried to calm Bennett down, emphasizing the importance of getting the doctors away. However, this was like lighting a powder keg. Bennett screamed hysterically, "Save him? You still want to save him? He deserves to die. He slept with my wife and tried to violate my daughter. He deserves to die." Bang! Without hesitation, Bennett fired a shot into the hospital bed, startling the doctors who immediately ducked for cover. Due to the hostage's presence, the officers hesitated to fire, resulting in a stalemate. The police hadn't expected that among those returning to Canada for medical treatment on a S.H.I.E.L.D. plane, there would be an armed assailant. Even more unexpected was that he was the culprit responsible for the unfortunate man in the hospital bed, losing both arms and now likely dying. Glancing at the barely breathing patient, one of the older officers gestured for everyone to step back. Don't get agitated. We'll investigate your situation. You can name your terms. If you release the hostage, everything is negotiable. Clearly, when it comes to empty talk, police all over the world are the same. Release the hostage? If you release the hostage, Bennett would be riddled with bullets in no time. Bennett hid his head behind the nurse's head, the muzzle of his gun pressed firmly against her chin. Get those guys out of here. Get them out of here. If it weren't for them, that son of a bitch would be dead already. The officers followed Bennett's gaze to Leni and Carlson, whose fighter jet was still parked there unharmed. Leni and Carlson were wearing sunglasses at night, so their expressions were obscured. However, judging from their crossed arms, they were clearly watching the show. The officers knew these two were from S.H.I.E.L.D. Their logo was clearly emblazoned on the jet. Are you confident? Carlson asked softly beside Leni. Not a problem. Do you want to get involved? Leni glanced at Carlson, and after receiving a clear answer, she slowly retreated back into the cockpit. Seeing Leni disappear from sight, Bennett instantly felt immense pressure and quickly pulled the nurse behind her. Get them out of here. Did you hear me? I said get them out of here. Bennett released the gun pressed against the nurse's chin and fired a shot at Carlson, who was standing at the cockpit door. Bang! This shot sent another shiver down the spines of the medical staff, and the police officers nearly emptied their magazines reflexively. There wasn't a single inch of cover on the damn hospital rooftop. If a fight broke out, nobody would be safe. The nurse suffered the most. Those two shots had terrified her, her body trembling and her legs shaking, sobbing softly but afraid to utter a sound. Only Carlson in the cabin remained motionless, still maintaining his spectator's expression, completely unfazed that Bennett might actually shoot him. Bennett's forehead was beaded with sweat. The man in sunglasses had put immense pressure on him, especially now that the woman was gone. Thinking of this, Bennett suddenly realized that all the lights in the cabin had been turned off. He could only see the man in sunglasses standing at the cabin door. He couldn't see anything inside. Just as he was about to pull the nurse closer to shield himself, Bennett suddenly saw a glimmer of light between the man's legs. What is that? The next moment, he lost consciousness and collapsed limply to the ground. Chapter 147, The Good Sleep Bullet, is, as the name suggests, designed to help you sleep well. Leni gestured to Carlson and turned back to the fighter jet's cockpit. Sky, turn off the cockpit lights. Fitz, give me that little gadget you were working on. With that, Leni retrieved a SCAR-H assault rifle with a 7.62mm heavy barrel from thin air. This was Leni's secondary weapon when she served as a sniper in S.H.I.E.L.D's Rapid Reaction Force. It featured a 20-inch barrel, a Magpul RVG tactical grip, and a bipod. The sights were an Elkin Spectre DR1-4X optical sight, commonly known as a locomotive sight. The magazine held 20 rounds of 7.62 by 51mm NATO standard rifle ammunition. It balanced accuracy with providing some firepower for her teammates. Under everyone's surprised gaze, Leni quickly checked the magazine to confirm it was empty. You're going to use a good sleep bullet? Fitz guessed what Leni was planning and quickly rummaged through his luggage for some old toys he'd made. The so-called good sleep bullet was a special bullet that Fitz had co-developed with Simmons in S.H.I.E.L.D's research department. The bullet's head was made of special rubber, and it contained a special anesthetic powerful enough to take down an elephant without causing significant side effects. The original purpose of creating this gadget was to help S.H.I.E.L.D deal with high-threat targets, controlling enemies without causing fatalities. However, after S.H.I.E.L.D's testing, it was ultimately returned to Fitz due to its high cost and low practicality. After all, there were many other alternatives, whether traditional tranquilizer guns, stun guns, or even live ammunition. All were cheaper and more direct than Fitz's good sleep bullet. Fitz and Simmons had mentioned this toy to Leni during a casual conversation, even jokingly saying they'd underestimated field missions. Unexpectedly, his casual remark had actually been remembered by Leni. Where did I put it? Fitz frantically searched his locker on the plane, his mind a jumble of thoughts, sweating profusely with anxiety. In the backpack where you put your tablet, in the small outer pouch. You put it with the charger. Simmons sighed, watching Fitz frantically rummage around like a headless chicken, and picked up the backpack Fitz had carelessly tossed aside. Fitz gave Simmons a grateful look, then quickly pulled a small, silver white box from the backpack. The box was only slightly larger than a deck of cards, with a transparent lid that revealed 3 bullets stuffed with foam inside. These were souvenirs Fitz and Simmons had kept after providing the test equipment. They contained one 7.62 by 51mm rifle bullet, one 5.56 by 45mm rifle bullet, and one 9mm parabellum pistol bullet. Fitz hadn't expected to use this thing. He'd casually tossed it into his backpack and forgotten about it. He was surprised Simmons remembered it so clearly. He quickly opened the cap, took out the 7.62 by 51mm good sleep bullet, and handed it to Leni, who had already checked the chamber. The good sleep bullet's effect is short-lived, but if you want to instantly knock someone unconscious, I suggest you shoot them in the head. Fitz's face was itched with tension. This was his first time participating in a S.H.I.E.L.D. field operation at such close range. The Canadian air wasn't as cold as the Arctic, but his fingers still trembled uncontrollably. Don't worry, even if you hadn't said anything, I would have shot that idiot in the head anyway. Leni was furious. She'd been wary of the guy named Kaplan the whole way, and hadn't been very cautious about this victim. She hadn't paid any attention to the situation on the hospital bed. She hadn't expected this guy to hide a pistol under the injured person. She'd been fooled by this guy who'd been confessing all the way, which made her lose face and feel guilty for her dereliction of duty. With one hand, she pulled the bolt open the ejection port on the right side of the SCAR rifle, loading the sleep-inducing round into the chamber. Then, she gripped the handle again with her right hand and reset the bolt with her left, chambering around. Leni deployed the bipod at the front of the rifle, then crawled onto the floor of the fighter jet, her upper body emerging from under the curtain hanging in the cockpit. Under the cover of darkness and with Callson's line of sight obstructing her view, Leni set up the SCAR-H and whispered, "Ready to fire." Callson slightly spread his legs to allow Leni to aim. "Fire approved. Keep hostages safe." A slight smile played on Leni's lips as she looked through the scope and aimed at the target. "Understood." At this distance, magnified 4x by the locomotive sight, Leni could clearly see the zhening, ferocious, hideous expression on the other's face and his bloodshot eyes. "Get them out of here." "Did you hear me? I said get them out of here." Seeing the other party's agitated state and apparent fear of them, Leni stretched out her hand. "He might shoot. Don't move, he shouldn't be able to hit you." Before she finished speaking, Bennett pulled the trigger, a bullet flying just past Callson's shoulder. The next instant, before anyone in the cabin watching the situation on the monitor could gasp, the bullet miraculously vanished. "His marksmanship is really terrible," Callson said casually, not moving an inch, still standing there with his arms crossed, looking quite dashing. Leni didn't reply, but instead put her hand back on her rifle, calming her breathing. Potential unleashed, activated. Golden flames ignited in Leni's eyes, her gaze fixed on Bennett's head hiding behind the nurse. Thud. A muffled sound, suppressed by a silencer, reached everyone's ears. As Leanne pulled the trigger, the firing pin in the chamber ignited a primer at the base of the bullet, and the specially designed bullet was propelled out of the barrel by the high-temperature gas, striking the target directly. Before the Canadian police could react, Bennett was shot in the forehead and collapsed limply. Clang. The spent cartridge ejected through the ejection port and landed on the metal floor of the fighter jet. Then, a soft click came from the chamber, and the SCAR-H, deprived of ammunition, entered bolt-hold open position. "Killed." Leanne uttered 2 words calmly, reached out and pressed the reset button on the side of the gun, releasing the bolt and disengaging the safety. "Let's go, back," Callson said into the communicator, remaining standing still until Melinda closed the hatch. The rest was no longer their concern. Their S.H.I.E.L.D. colleagues here would handle the rest. All Callson needed to do was provide them with the surveillance footage from the cockpit. Of course, Callson wouldn't provide the footage from the cockpit, that involved too much. Amidst the bewildered gazes of Canadian police and medical personnel, the Quinjet slowly took off and gradually disappeared into the night sky. Chapter 148 The Sleeping Clam Meat of the Sky Sea. "You should prepare a few more of these little gadgets when you get back, I might need them someday." Leni removed the black curtain from the cabin and had Sky turn the lights back on. She then sat down to inspect the weapon. "Its name is Good Sleep Bullet?" After pulling the bolt back and forth to ensure there were no bullets in the chamber, Leni returned the scar H to the void storage. Huh? Oh. Fitz was slightly taken aback by Leni's aura. It was somewhat different from the Leni he usually saw. He didn't know what killing intent was, but at this moment, he felt an extremely powerful intimidation emanating from Leni. It's just a name I use. Because it wasn't adopted by S.H.I.E.L.D, it doesn't have an official name. Leni took the small silver box from Fitz. Inside lay the remaining 2 bullets. As they were experimental, the cartridge cases still had labels on them. Your creation has great potential, but the neurotoxin side effects are too severe, and the cost is too high. Leni thought for a moment, then retrieved an oyster from the void and handed it to Fitz. This is sleep clam meat. As the name suggests, those who eat it will immediately fall into deep sleep. It's often used to treat insomnia. You can research it with Simmons. Sleep clam meat is made from a type of black oyster native to the Sky Sea. It's jet black in color and rich in minerals. Furthermore, this black oyster secretes a special hormone that can stimulate organisms to produce hypnotic substances, and in severe cases, even cause coma. Sleep clam meat, made from black oysters, also contains some of this hormone, thus inducing sleep when consumed. This stuff has very few side effects. You can try it when you get back. If you can replace the neurotoxin you were using, I can provide you with some. Leni thought for a moment and added, of course, it would be even better if you could analyze its hormonal components and synthesize it. Fitz looked at the oyster in his hand in disbelief and turned to Simmons, who was equally surprised. Where did you get this amazing creature? Simmons snatched the oyster from Fitz's hand, his joy evident. Classified. You'll know when your clearance level is upgraded. Leni kept him in suspense, intending to pin the origin of this thing directly to Asgard. Anyway, these researchers wouldn't have much of a chance to verify it, so whatever she said was fine. What were you guys talking about? After hanging up the phone, Carlson ended the communication with the Canadian branch of S.H.I.E.L.D, whose people had already finished the cleanup. I think I just heard someone say classified? Skyr rolled her eyes and pointed to the sleep clam meat in Simmons' hand. This is a magical sleeping oyster that Leni brought out for Simmons to study, saying its origin is classified. She clearly disliked S.H.I.E.L.D's secretive access system. In her mind, she had the right to know what she had access to. Carlson frowned, glancing at the black oyster Simmons was holding, then at Leni. Sleeping oyster? From that place? Carlson guessed it came from the Arad continent Leni had mentioned. Whether you tell them or not is up to you, it's your decision here. Leni shrugged, making a lightning bolt pattern with her finger. Carlson frowned, thinking for a moment, then understood what Leni meant. It involves a lot of things. I don't think it's a good thing to tell them those things too soon. Leni didn't reply. Carlson could be stubborn and inflexible at times like that. It's alright, it was bound to happen sooner or later anyway. Tell me about that guy, what are those Canadians up to? Ignoring Sky's slight dissatisfaction, Carlson smoothly shifted the topic to today's events. The crew member named Perez had been taken to the operating room by doctors. The bullet had struck his left abdomen, and his condition was unstable. He was still on the operating table. As for the guy named Bennett, he had been arrested by Canadian police, and the specific reasons were still under investigation. The Canadian branch of S.H.I.E.L.D had also handled the aftermath for the investigation team, and it was believed that the truth would come to light soon. That guy said that Perez slept with his wife and even tried to violate his daughter. Leni frowned, thinking that Bennett was really patient, not daring to make a move the whole way, only daring to draw his gun upon reaching their destination. But according to that guy named Kaplan, Bennett doesn't seem to be married, let alone have children. Carlson rubbed his chin, his tone somewhat amused. Huh? What does that mean? Sky was very surprised. Was there some kind of twist? At first, those people said that Perez had his hands cut off while saving Bennett. But Bennett's later account didn't seem to fit. It sounded like the accident was premeditated. But now they're saying Bennett isn't married and has no children at all. Who's lying? Everyone was baffled, and Carlson also felt something was amiss. Leni, in particular, suspected something was wrong with a man named Kaplan. This man gave her an inexplicable feeling, somewhat like Sitwell, or... Leni's pupils contracted. She knew what that feeling was. It was Hydra. No wonder that guy gave her a feeling that something wasn't right, but why would a Hydra member be here? And that guy didn't seem to be Alexander Pierce's subordinate, nor was he from S.H.I.E.L.D. Then why did he know her, and why was he so wary of her? Leni could sense the slight hostility that Guy had shown her on the plane. Her APG-63 radar system had been alarming almost the entire time, which was why Leni hadn't noticed Bennett's strange behavior. Her attention had been completely drawn to the man named Kaplan. "You also suspect Kaplan?" Coulson noticed the expression on Leni's face. He had noticed her wariness of him on the plane. He even sensed Kaplan's hostility towards Leni, but the man didn't show any unusual behavior, so he didn't make a move. "I think both of them are suspicious," Leni said, not explicitly. She wasn't sure if the man was actually sent by Alexander Pierce. If so, she would naturally go and confront that old man after this was over. If not, it meant she was being watched by other Hydra forces. Between the two possibilities, she leaned towards the latter. She didn't believe that S.H.I.E.L.D hadn't informed Hydra of her identity after the last incident. "Unless, this is really annoying, my roommate's snoring is deafening, my mind is a mess, and I feel there are logical problems with this chapter. I'll post it for now and revise it later. Any suggestions are welcome. What does chapter 149 mean? Are they all dead?" At 10 p.m. New York time, after witnessing the entire sunrise again, the investigation team returned to the Arctic Circle. As everyone dragged their weary bodies back to wash up and go to sleep, Coulson's phone rang. Without trying to hide it from his team, at this hour, only the crew on duty remained in the cabin. Coulson gestured for them to wait a moment, then went to the side to communicate with the other end. "So, any results?" The team exchanged glances. Coulson hadn't intended for them to eavesdrop, and at this distance, they could only hear his voice. Therefore, they huddled together and whispered, "I still stand by my opinion. Bennett probably didn't lie, and Perez is very suspicious," Skye said confidently. As a hacker who frequented the dark web for years, she'd seen plenty of these kinds of farcical scenarios. "Things are far more complicated than that. Bennett might have been used." Meester subconsciously adjusted her sunglasses, a habit she hadn't broken even after her vision recovered. According to the ship's doctor, Perez must have pushed Bennett away on his own. If the mechanical failure was premeditated by Bennett, then where did that pistol come from? Fitz and Simmons nodded in agreement. They weren't familiar with the Canadian's modus operandi, but they knew without a doubt that a pistol wasn't something that could be casually brought onto an icebreaker. Leni remained non-committal. The origin of the pistol was indeed suspicious, but she suspected that the core of the matter wasn't that. Bennett could have simply killed Perez with a gun, but that would undoubtedly have been a Pyrrhic victory. Judging from the current situation, Leni could conclude that the other helicopter on the Louis St. Laurent's return for repairs was also pre-planned by Bennett. By using various means to determine the distance to nearby ships that could provide support and calculating the helicopter rescue time, Bennett was capable of creating a meticulously planned accidental death. But an unexpected factor emerged: the investigation team and the Quinjet they were piloting. The arrival of Coulson and his team disrupted Bennett's original plans, forcing him to confront a group of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents of unknown strength. Ultimately, this forced him to resort to this desperate measure. On the surface, this seemed to be the case, and the group's discussion on the way back confirmed this. However, Leni still felt something was amiss with a man named Kaplan. Why would someone clearly from Hydra be here? His profile listed him as a member of the research team, but he didn't seem to have any connection with either of them. He was a marginal figure who shouldn't be among them, like a Pepsi in a Coca-Cola pile, utterly out of place. Now, Leni was certain that the man was Hydra. He was likely the one who provided the pistol to Bennett. After all, what would a sailor who spent most of his time at sea need a pistol for? Even if it was to fend off a polar bear, a 9mm pistol would be useless except to provoke it. So what was their purpose? Why did they want to kill Perez? Was the motive for the murder really that simple? Now Hydra is even getting involved in family matters like this? Just then, Coulson hung up the phone and returned to the group. What happened? Skye asked impatiently. Perez's surgery failed, the gunshot wound aggravated his physical condition, and he ultimately didn't make it. Coulson glanced at everyone's expressions and continued in a deep, serious voice, Bennett is also dead. He was shot in the police station. The killer was that guy named Kaplan. Everyone was shocked, their faces filled with disbelief. But that wasn't all. Even more outrageous is that after killing Bennett, Kaplan committed suicide by shooting himself before the Canadian police could catch him. Upon hearing this, everyone froze. What did that mean? They were all dead? Skye was the first to object. Wait a minute. If you say that, Doesn't that mean only the ship's doctor is dead in this case? Coulson nodded without speaking, turning to look at Leni, wanting to hear her thoughts. While I can't be sure what caused this, I think our previous speculations are correct. Leni's gaze deepened, her suspicions growing stronger. Bennett was likely manipulated by Kaplan. The one who truly wanted to kill Perez was Kaplan. If I'm not mistaken, he committed suicide before Perez's death was confirmed. Coulson didn't deny this, he had indeed overlooked this point. So the conclusion is clear, the mastermind used someone else to kill, and when that failed, they committed suicide out of guilt. Leni concluded the matter, effectively closing the case, and then told everyone to go back and rest. However, she didn't mention Hydra. Now wasn't the time to expose their disguise. She had a feeling that these guys were actually after her. Kaplan had clearly recognized her, and hadn't acted on the plane out of fear. But Leni couldn't be sure if Kaplan recognized her as Hydra or had seen her at the Stark Expo. Even if she leaned towards the latter, now that he was dead, there was no way to verify anything, no one to ask. To truly verify this idea, she'd probably have to find some old man who turned her into a computer. Never mind, our mission is complete anyway. Even though we couldn't save them, it's none of our business. Time for bed, we have to continue the search tomorrow. Captain, they're back. Jason cautiously pushed open his captain's door and whispered to Captain Morgan. I know. Captain Morgan put the satellite phone back in the drawer, his gaze somewhat gloomy. That's it. We couldn't save them, that's all we could do. Jason nodded, offering no further comment, and only got up to leave after confirming his captain had no further requests. Captain Morgan stared at the closed door, his expression gradually turning ferocious. A rabble. You didn't even appreciate the opportunity. All idiots. Idiots. He raised the cup in his hand as if to smash it, but ultimately put it back down. Strucker's men are truly a bunch of useless idiots. If the Winter Soldier hadn't arrived in time, the organization's plans would have been completely ruined. Ardef Morgan reached into the drawer and took out the satellite phone again, then dialed the same number once more. Requesting access to the Winter Soldier, something came up, so Chapter 2 will be a little later. Is it Chapter 150? We'll find out when we go down and take a look. It was mid-July, nearly 2 weeks since the incident. Since the entire investigation was handled by the Canadian branch of S.H.I.E.L.D, Coulson couldn't interfere and could only get a general understanding. The victim was dead, the accomplice was murdered, and the mastermind committed suicide. All the key figures in the case were dead, so the Canadian police had to close the case. The insurance company paid a large sum to Perez's family, so they didn't pursue the matter further. By the way, Bennett wasn't legally married, but he had a fiancée and an adopted daughter. Neither of them admitted to ever seeing Perez, and the Canadian police, after investigating, found no evidence of their involvement, ultimately leaving the matter unresolved. Since the victim's family wasn't pursuing the matter, Coulson didn't press them further, so the matter seemed to have ended there. Except for Leni, the members of the investigation team didn't dwell on it anymore, as they had more important things to do. Wait! I found something! Fitz shouted excitedly, noticing the urgent alarm from the metal detector. Me too, it looks like a big guy. Meister, operating another detector, also reported the good news. The sonar and radar systems showed something unusual beneath the ice. Coulson quickly compiled the data from the three devices onto the large screen in the cockpit. To make it more visually clear, Fitz transformed all the data into a holographic image, and a fighter jet with wings twice the length of a Quinjet appeared on the holographic image. This can't be. Skye murmured in disbelief. Melinda, move 50 meters to the right. Coulson's voice was filled with barely suppressed excitement. His intuition told him that this time they might have really found it. Melinda, in the pilot's seat, didn't say much, slowly reducing the output of the two turbojet engines, lowering the Quinjet slightly. Then, she adjusted the flaps and gently turned, controlling the fighter to slowly fly a distance to the right. As the detector beneath the fuselage swept across the ice, the shape of the large aircraft became increasingly clear on the large screen in the cockpit, until it was finally fully revealed. The surface is covered with nearly 2 meters of ice. No wonder those satellites and helicopters didn't spot it. Simmons's eyes flashed with a strange light, then he exclaimed excitedly, "This should be the fighter jet a gentleman was piloting, right?" Leni unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up from the co-pilot's seat. "We'll find out if it is. The ice thickness in this area is pretty good. If it's okay, we'll land." Fitz and Mester exchanged a glance and quickly analyzed the structure of the ice below, finally confirming a relatively safe landing location. Cool down the cabin, everyone change your clothes, let's go down and take a look at this old guy. Leni's words were twofold. When she saw the aircraft's shape drawn on the holographic image, she had already confirmed that this was the Hydra fighter jet. The old guy referred to both the high-tech fighter jet that crashed in 1945 and the old ice pop on board who had been asleep for over 70 years. Melinda also showed a rare hint of emotion on her face, her hands moving non-stop as she maneuvered the fighter jet to land slowly according to Fitz's instructions. As the Quinjet's landing gear touched the ice, Melinda spoke into the communicator, "I'm not going down. Remember to record it, I want to see it when we get back." Leni gave a thumbs up to Melinda, reassuring her that she was prepared. Retrieving her GoPro from the air and turning it on to ensure the camera was working, Leni stepped to the front of the group. "I'll go down first. Simmons just checked and there aren't any polar bears around, but I'll go first just to be safe." The hatch slowly opened, letting in dry, cold air. To avoid disturbing Melinda in the cockpit, Leni gestured for everyone to follow, then quickly disembarked. "The ice is very solid, watch your step, everyone. Don't twist your ankles," she warned, before heading towards the cabin location marked on her laptop. "Just how big is this thing?" Skye followed behind, her eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. Although Simmons said there were no polar bears in the vicinity, who could guarantee that some unsuspecting creature wouldn't sneak over when they weren't looking? Simmons said those things had a nose far more sensitive than a dog's. The Hydra Valkyrie giant bomber, equipped with 2 jet engines and 8 piston engines, with a wingspan of 540 feet, approximately 164.592 meters, capable of carrying multiple suicide single-person rotorcraft bombers, Fitz said confidently, pulling up the records of this aircraft in the S.H.I.E.L.D. database. "In short, it's huge." Not wanting to hear Fitz continue his rambling, Leni interrupted him, stopping and crouching down to brush away the frost from the ice. "The Arctic is extremely cold and the air is incredibly dry. There's simply no way for large amounts of water vapor to exist in the sky, so it almost never snows there. The thin layer of snow on the ice is actually from the cold wind blowing in from elsewhere. Or it's simply frost." The ice was thick, just a protruding cockpit section of the fighter jet beneath their feet was nearly 2 meters thick. Without large-scale mining equipment, it would take a lot of effort for Leni and the others to break through the ice. "Should we notify the Polaris?" Skye's first thought was to seek help. The Polaris carried large salvage and mining equipment, which would make dealing with a bomber much easier. "No rush. There are too many people on board, so we can deal with the salvage work later. Let's see if we can get into the cockpit first." Carlson shook his head. He had a feeling that Steve Rogers might be on the plane. Leni had the same idea as Carlson, and this bit of ice wouldn't be a problem for her. "You guys stand behind me, keep your distance." Seeing Leni's intention, everyone quickly went around to Leni's back to observe from a distance. A playful look appeared in Maester's eyes, but fortunately, the sunglasses concealed it from the others. A flash of light appeared between Leanne's hands, and the focused flamethrower she had used before reappeared. Without hesitation, Leanne slightly lowered the flamethrower's nozzle and pulled the trigger. A fierce burst of high-temperature flames erupted, fanning outwards upon contact with the ice surface. As the flames continued to heat up, bursts of heat began to dissipate, and the surrounding air became humid. Under the continued scorching heat of the blue flames, the ice in front of Leanne quickly thinned, gradually forming an ice crater. The temperature at the center of the crater was easily over 1,000 degrees Celsius. The thick ice surface didn't even have time to melt before it vaporized and dissipated. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.